10:28 a.m., much of the top floors of the other tower also fell to the streets below.
I need some water.
This was the view across the upper New York Bay past the Statue of Liberty at about 10:30 in the morning. And this afternoon, just before 5:30, a 47-story building in the Trade Center complex collapsed.
There was speculation, but no definite word about who was behind those attacks. Most of the speculation centered on the Middle East. Again to Kwame Holman.
10:56 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat spoke in Gaza.
First of all, I am offering my condolences, the condolences of the Palestinian people to the American President, President Bush, to his government, to the American people for this terrible act. We are completely shocked, unbelievable.
In the West Bank, a spokesman for the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, or DFLP, a radical PLO faction, denied his group was involved in the attacks.
The DFLP has no relation to this accident or this incident. We have always been against terroristic actions, against civilian targets, and especially outside the occupied territories. But in spite of that, we deny our responsibility, but we call upon the American administration to review their attitude and their policy towards the Palestinian question, because this policy arouses the anger and the hatred of our people and of all Arab and Islamic peoples, and it's liable actually to harm the interests of the United States in our region, and therefore it has to be reviewed.
The spiritual leader of Hamas, the pro-Palestinian Islamic resistance movement, said this.
First of all, we don't support attacks on civilians, and we don't support aggression towards innocent people. However, the United States should revise its current stance and has to look again at its position very carefully towards people all over the world. If the U.S. doesn't want to be targeted and suffer the same way as other people are through oppression, injustice, and exploitation. In that regard, America finds itself today weakened in the face of the rest of humanity taking its own revenge against American oppression and injustice.
And in Pakistan, an ambassador of Afghanistan's ruling Taliban also denounced the attacks.
I strongly condemn these incidents. I want an investigation to be carried out, and who has committed this should be brought to justice. We do not allow Osama bin Laden to operate from our land for such activities. We have taken all communications from him, and he is not in contact with anybody. He has no facilities to carry out such activity. The powerful rivals of America can carry out such activities, but not Osama.
At Jerusalem's Damascus Gate, some Palestinian men, women, and children took to the streets in celebration after hearing of the events in the United States. In Lebanon, at a Palestinian refugee camp, there were more celebrations as men fired their weapons in the air.
President Bush vowed to find and punish the people behind the attacks. Here is what he said, and in a separate statement, the reaction of Secretary of State Colin Powell.
Just before noon, Secretary of State Colin Powell spoke from Lima, Peru, where he cut short his first official visit to South America. Before leaving, he thanked foreign ministers for adopting a message condemning terrorism.
A terrible, terrible tragedy has befallen my nation, but has befallen all the nations of this region, all the nations of the world, and befallen all those who believe in democracy. Once again, we see terrorism, we see terrorists, people who don't believe in democracy, people who believe that with the destruction of buildings, with the murder of people, they can somehow achieve a political purpose. They can destroy buildings, they can kill people, and we will be saddened by this tragedy, but they will never be allowed to kill the spirit of democracy. They cannot destroy our society. They cannot destroy our belief in the democratic way. You can be sure that America will deal with this tragedy in a way that brings those responsible to justice. You can be sure that as terrible a day as this is for us, we will get through it because we are a strong nation, a nation that believes in itself.
A short time later, President Bush spoke to reporters at Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. He'd flown there following his education event in Florida.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward, and freedom will be defended. I want to reassure the American people that the full resources of the federal government are working to assist local authorities to save lives and to help the victims of these attacks. Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts. I've been in regular contact with the Vice President, Secretary of Defense, the National Security Team, and my cabinet. We have taken all appropriate security precautions to protect the American people. Our military at home and around the world is on high alert status, and we have taken the necessary security precautions to continue the functions of your government. We have been in touch with the leaders of Congress and with world leaders to assure them that we will do whatever is necessary to protect America and Americans. I ask the American people to join me in saying a thanks for all the folks who have been fighting hard to rescue our fellow citizens, and to join me in saying a prayer for the victims and their families. The resolve of our great nation is being tested, but make no mistake, we will show the world that we will pass this test. God bless.
The president then flew to the headquarters of the Strategic Air Command in Nebraska.
And the president landed at the White House moments ago. He will address the nation around 9 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll carry that live. About a half an hour ago, Defense Secretary Rumsfeld and General Shelton, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, spoke to reporters in a makeshift newsroom at the Pentagon.
It's an indication that the United States government is functioning in the face of this terrible act against our country. I should add that the briefing here is taking place in the Pentagon. The Pentagon's functioning. It'll be in business tomorrow. I know the interest in casualty figures, and all I can say is it's not possible to have solid casualty figures at this time. And the various components are doing roster checks, and we'll have information at some point in the future, and as quickly as it's possible to have it, it will certainly be made available to each of you. I'll be happy to take a few questions after asking First General Shelton if he would like to say anything, and then we will allow the others to make a remark or two.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Ladies and gentlemen, as the Secretary just said, today we have watched the tragedy of an outrageous act of barbaric terrorism carried out by fanatics against both civilians and military people, acts that have killed and maimed many innocent and decent citizens of our country. I extend my condolences to the entire Department of Defense families, military and civilian, and to the families of all those throughout our nation who lost loved ones. I think this is indeed a reminder of the tragedy and the tragic dangers that we face day in and day out, both here at home as well as abroad. I would tell you up front, I have no intentions of discussing today what comes next, but make no mistake about it, your armed forces are ready.
Now more on who might have been behind this tragedy today, and to Margaret Warner.
We get three views on that question. Larry Johnson was the State Department's Deputy Director for Counterterrorism in the first Bush administration and a counterterrorism official at the CIA before that. He is now a security consultant. Bruce Hoffman is Vice President of RAND, a research organization. His latest book is Inside Terrorism. And Shibli Telhami is a professor of political science at the University of Maryland. He's written widely on the Middle East. Welcome, gentlemen. Paul Hoffman, who could have done this? Who had the wherewithal, the motive, the opportunity?
Well, I think what's clear is you had a dedicated terrorist or dedicated group of terrorists who carried out a detailed reconnaissance, who had the right preparation, the commitment and the professionalism to pull it off. But I don't think these are necessarily qualities that are exclusively in one or another group throughout the world.
Would you narrow it down to the Middle East, or not even that?
Well, certainly the ferment in the Middle East provides plenty of opportunities to carry out an attack like this, and indeed the United States has incurred the enmity of many of the parties there.
Larry Johnson.
I would go a little further. When you look back over the last 8 years in terms of which individuals or groups have been involved in killing Americans, the one that's at the top of the list, responsible for about 80% of those, is Osama bin Laden. In addition to that,
you're talking, and briefly describe him just for people who don't know who he is.
Osama bin Laden is born of a Yemeni mother. He's a Saudi Arabian expatriate. He's hiding out in Afghanistan. If we do have from a court case, he's clearly implicated in the bombing of the U.S. embassies in East Africa. That was the first coordinated terrorist attack of its type against the United States. Add to that, there are intelligence reports which indicate that Osama bin Laden's forces were receiving flight training in the last several months. To my knowledge, we don't know of any other groups that have been getting that kind of training. When you see what happened today, the groups that carry this out, at a minimum, they had somebody that knew how to maintain the airspeed and steer the plane. And it's not to bash bin Laden and to say he's a convenient villain, because I think sometimes we've made too much of him. But you don't have anybody else in the world that on such a consistent basis is calling for the death of Americans and inciting people to violence. The good news in this is the vast majority of Muslims reject his nonsense.
All right, go back to this flight training. Are you saying these were intelligence reports that the U.S. government had before the
My understanding is that before today, there was intelligence information that indicated that Osama bin Laden forces were receiving training in flight operations.
Shibli Telhami, your view on possible perpetrators here, the motive, why these targets?
Well, first of all, I think we know that it's unlikely to have been organizations that are operating in the Palestinian areas or Lebanon on the Israeli-Arab front for three reasons. One is we don't know of any organization that has the capacity and the reach to carry out such operations. Number two, all of these organizations, whether they're Lebanese or Palestinian, have pretty much in the past few months focused all their attention on the Israeli, Palestinian, and Lebanese arena. And number three, any perpetrator of such an attack, this is not an ordinary attack, this is like a declaration of war, would have to worry about the host country. And none of the host countries in the Israeli-Arab arena would allow the space to conduct such an operation.
So you mean, for instance, Syria, which hosts some of these groups you believe would not put Syria at risk from the United States?
Absolutely. Syria would not allow it, and if they were to undertake such an operation, it'll be the end of them. And clearly, because Syria very much knows that an operation like this will lead to attacks against it, not just against those groups. This is like a declaration of war, and I do not believe that there is any country in the Arab-Israeli arena that would allow this to happen knowingly, and that any group that operate in that arena would test them in this particular environment.
So Bruce Hoffman, do you agree with that? But if so, then why would Afghanistan be different?
Well, I think Afghanistan, in the sense, because there isn't a unified government there, because there is a vacuum of power, that certainly bin Laden and his minions have had the opportunity to train and perhaps carry out precisely the training that Larry has described, is perhaps, at least that territory is the most likely suspect. But there are any number of terrorist experts that have speculated before the perpetrators and been proven wrong. But
people earlier in the program tonight have said that this couldn't be done without state sponsorship or state support. What's your view on that?
I disagree with that. I think there's more than 4 people in the world that know how to fly jet planes. I mean, it's not a providence that just governments can do that type of instruction. Certainly the preparation involved is something extraordinary. It's very rare ever that terrorists carry out simultaneous attacks, especially of this order. But at the same time, I think you have to put it into perspective. It's the difficulty of penetrating these. Obviously, the security at 3 different airports showed that it was vulnerable. Terrorists looked for breaches in security, were able to penetrate it. I mean, yes, this is a very sophisticated operation in the general scheme of terrorism, but to say that therefore this has to be a state behind it, I'm not ready to make that conclusion yet.
How do you think that an operation like this simultaneous, sophisticated operation, could have escaped U.S. intelligence?
Well, number one, U.S. intelligence is in an abysmal state.
Abysmal.
Abysmal. We have really lost our human capability. It's still oriented towards a Cold War. The reality is, to go into this arena, you've got to be willing to enter a sewer. We want to fight rats, but we're not willing to get into the sewer. We want to stay outside and shoot them if they pop their heads up. We have to make a choice in this country. And I've talked to several friends who are still in the agency. There's enormous frustration. They are relying largely on liaisons, intelligence reporting from other countries, not actual on-the-ground human sources, because the risks that are entailed in recruiting those sources open these people up to prosecution. Just recall several years ago, CIA officers that were in Iraq training Kurds to attack Iraqis wound up being temporarily detained and threatened with arrest by the FBI because they were, quote, violating the order on an assassination because the Iraqi Kurds were going to go kill possibly Saddam. This is insane. We have entered a land of Alice in Wonderland where we want to have this, we want to be clean and we want to be neat and we want to be antiseptic, but we don't want anyone to kill us. We have got to make some choices. And unfortunately, this horrible tragedy today is a wake-up call that will galvanize this country in the same way that we were galvanized in 1941 after the Japanese attack at Pearl Harbor.
Did you want to add something to that?
Well, I would take a slightly different view. I think there's certainly improvements to be made in intelligence. I wouldn't say that it's completely broken or that this is exclusively an intelligence failure. I think at the end of the day, we're going to find plenty of blame to go around, not least in the physical security measures that should have been in place in our airports to prevent exactly this type of thing. I think we have to keep in perspective that the intelligence community has, over the past more than 3 years, effectively stymied bin Laden at several different junctures. I think to expect that we'll ever stop him all the time is unrealistic. Where I would agree with Larry, though, is that I think fundamentally the architecture we have for the intelligence community, indeed how we view threats in this country, has been proven before, but certainly today, anachronistic. It's directed almost exclusively against military threats coming from nation states. What we see today is that the threats are more diffuse. They're different than that. They're from non-state actors as well. And that's, I think, where the change has to come, not just in overhauling the intelligence community, but the whole way we look at security.
Well, look, if it turns out to be bin Laden, and that's certainly possible, it really would be an extraordinary circumstance where you have the intelligence failing, because he has been the #1 priority of U.S. anti-terrorism activity. He's been watched day in and day out internationally with so much focus. And you have an operation on this scale by so many people that took so many months of planning on U.S. territory, in the Washington area, in New York. Something is wrong.
Does it surprise you, Professor, that nobody has claimed responsibility? There was one group that claimed responsibility this morning, Palestinian-linked group, that then the spokesman, we just ran him, said, no, we didn't do it. But other than that, no claim.
Well, we have not heard yet from Osama bin Laden. But it doesn't surprise me that all the other groups who distance themselves from it, including the extremist groups operating in the Middle East, because #1, they know that in terms of public opinion, most of them understand that the consequences are negative. #2, they know that they can bear the brunt of the retaliation. And I do not believe that it was in their interest to carry it out. It does surprise me that no one at all does take responsibility, but it's too early.
So how difficult will it be to get to the bottom of who did this?
We have the advantage that in this case it looks like the flight data recorders are going to be recoverable, number one. Number two, they're going to be able to identify the people that got on the plane. That's fairly
You mean from rosters
good
and so on?
certainty, and reviewing video footage from the security checkpoints at the various airports. It's not like the wreckage is scattered over an ocean, which makes...
Question, does everybody who's getting on a plane, are they videotaped?
It varies by airport. Really, this highlights something that Bruce pointed out, and we need to understand the United States still has a dual standard with aviation security. We have one standard internationally, one standard domestically. These folks clearly understood that. They understood if you're on an international flight, you're going to run into sky marshals. If you're on a domestic flight, you're home free.
You're talking about armed marshals on a plane.
Correct. And this does, the early reports indicate people use knives or some sort of object to threaten to stab people. We've seen a shift
You're
away
basing that on a cell phone call.
On the cell phone call.
That was made from the wife of a...
It's going to, I think, when they review it, it'll be one of two things. It'll either be that or be someone threatened that they had an explosive, whether it was a genuine explosive or not. Because getting on planes with a firearm has been pretty difficult. But I think they're going to have to review at a minimum keeping the pilot's door locked and not opening it under any circumstances.
Bruce Hoffman, what's your view on how tough it's going to be to make good on essentially what the president said, which is we're going to hunt down and punish those responsible?
Well, first we have to identify who's responsible for it, and that's, I think, one of the challenges that underscores how we have a very different enemy. In the past, when we face these types of threats, it's been a government. There's been a target for us. It's going to take some time and some effort to identify the correct target. So I think we have to resist the temptation to do something, do anything, but be rather more patient and do the right thing and do something that will, truly have a demonstrable effect.
Do you think there's anything the United States can do? And I don't mean to make it sound so futile, but I mean, the United States has launched attacks, tit for tat kind of attacks after other terrorist bombings, but they go on.
There are two things that we have to keep in mind. Number one is you can't fight it alone. You have to fight it with others. And even if we identify who the perpetrators are, you need the cooperation of the international community and countries in the region. And therefore, you have to have robust political relations and common interests to fight it. So that one has to remember, because even if you identify it as was suspected with the bombings in Africa, in fact, the operation didn't quite work, and even though it had political consequence. Number two, like anything else, terrorism depends on supply and demand. And the supply you have to work on. You have to try to eliminate the possibilities to fight those who carried out. But you also have to understand that there is deprivation out there. There's frustrations. Those groups try to essentially use the sentiments in the region. Now there is a lot of anti-American sentiment, a lot of anti-Israeli sentiment, and they're trying to use it for their own political purposes. And there's a political dimension that has to be employed in the fight against terrorism.
I have a much more pragmatic approach. Let's go after the people that kill Americans. And when you do the body count list, the two individuals that have killed more Americans in the last 20 years, Ibn Mahmoud, security chief for Hezbollah, who's still hiding out between the Bekaa Valley and Iran, and Osama bin Laden. Those facts are irrefutable. We don't need to focus on the world. We don't need to focus on 150 countries. We focus on a very narrow area. But you get those people, you eliminate the major source of death and destruction for American citizens.
All right, Larry Johnson, Bruce Hoffman, and Professor Tilhami. Thank you all three very much.
Thank you, Margaret.
Now to Elizabeth Farnsworth for another view of what happened today.
And joining me is General George Jawan. He was Supreme Allied Commander of NATO from 1993 to 1997. General Jawan, speaking as a military man, what do you see when you look at these attacks? What is it that characterizes them for you?
Makes me very angry, to be very blunt about it, that this sort of attack could take place in our country and against targets as we saw them in New York and at the Pentagon. So it's very disconcerting to me that this could happen in our country.
And what do you see specifically? The coordination of it, the different places that were attacked?
Well, very well planned, as was said in the earlier segment. Attacks like this take months to prepare. This has been going on for some time, well rehearsed. They chose their airports and targets well. They knew exactly what they were doing. And as was mentioned by several commentators, we have to really look at our intelligence collection effort and our entire strategy in this post-Cold War period on the real threats that face Americans and indeed much of the free world. This was an attack on democracy. This was an attack on our way of life. This was an attack against America and what it stands for.
General, because it was so well coordinated and it may have taken so long to plan, should it have been easier to pick up?
It should have been, and that's what we need to find out. We've been through Beirut in '83, we've been through the Cobalt Tower, we've been through the Cole, and now this. We need to have a focused effort. This is every bit an asymmetrical threat, as we like to call it, but a threat against the United States, and we need to have the early warning as we would in a conventional way, in a conventional attack. We need to develop intelligence collection, human and other sources to prevent this thing from happening again.
You know a lot about some of those earlier attacks. What did you learn afterwards, the kinds of hints that were in intelligence that were missed?
I'm not really trying to speculate here, but after each one of these, there were clues, there were tidbits of information that when pieced together after the fact could have given us this early warning that we need. It is trying to do that before the fact, trying to develop ways to have tipper information, critical information come to the forefront and brought to the attention of decision makers before something like this occurs. And we need to develop our intelligence apparatus to prepare for this, because I don't think this is going to be the last attack of this nature against the United States.
How can we do that?
Well, it takes a different mindset. We have talked a lot about human. We have to understand what human intelligence collection, not just technical means from satellites, very important, or UAVs, very important, unattended aerial vehicles. We have to get human intelligence, and we have to get back into that in a big way. There are risks in doing that. We have to make sure we have good controls over it, but we need to get back into that in order to prevent the sort of tragedy we saw today.
Explain human intelligence.
Human intelligence is eyes on the ground, people infiltrating other organizations, and a government that's willing to take those risks. And we have been, I think, in the last at least 10 to 20 years, we have not been able to get the funding, nor the resources, nor the political will to be able to do that at the level and the scale that we need to.
General, do you think these acts could have been carried out by an organization without government help?
I don't want to speculate on that, but probably yes. We are entering a period in the 21st century where individuals and organizations have the capability to do this, I think, without being state-sponsored. But I think we have to wait for the facts. We need to get the facts. I'm sure there are many now working on trying to array those facts and then fix the things that need to be fixed, particularly in the intelligence area.
Okay, you mentioned that people are trying to get those facts. Describe for us what military planners are doing now.
Well, there's going to be a massive investigation of all the intelligence over the last several months to see if we could piece together these little tidbits that I'm talking about. We saw that after Beirut, where there were tippers, as we call them, and I think people are going to look for those to see if we can narrow down who may be responsible for this. Telephone calls, faxes, other special intelligence to try to find out who is responsible.
And when is it appropriate to respond?
As soon as we know who is responsible for this, I would hope that it would be swift, it would be lethal, and it would be focused. And we should not say anything unless we're going to really carry it out. And when we say something, we've got to do it. And we've got to do it to make a clear signal here. And we should do it, by the way, if we have to unilaterally, but I would hope it would be in consultation with our allies and friends around the world. We need to create a worldwide effort here to combat this sort of terrorism.
General Jawan, I know that friends of yours are still missing in the Pentagon, and it's been a very difficult day for you. Were you surprised that even the Pentagon was attacked?
Yes, to be very blunt about it, but we are always vulnerable in this country, given our society, given our way of life. It's going to take special action here, and I hope the American people are ready for it, not just for tomorrow, but 6 months from now or 12 months from now, because I could assure you that some terrorist organization is already thinking about another target somewhere in our country or against one of our interests overseas. And remember, we have a lot of deployments of troops and embassies, and we always have to be on the guard for that. Try to anticipate, not react after the fact, but try to anticipate the event before it occurs.
General George Jawan, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Members of the President's cabinet spoke to reporters at the White House briefing room a short while ago.
Today, America has experienced one of the greatest tragedies ever witnessed on our soil. These heinous acts of violence are an assault on the security of our nation. They are an assault on the security and the freedom of every American citizen. We will not tolerate such acts. We will expend every effort and devote all the necessary resources to bring the people responsible for these acts, these crimes, to justice. Now is the time for us to come together as a nation to offer our support, our prayers for victims and for their families, for the rescue workers, for law enforcement officials, for every one of us that has been changed forever by this horrible tragedy. The following is a summary of the known facts surrounding today's incidents. American Airlines Flight 11 departed Boston for Los Angeles, hijacked by suspects armed with knives. This plane crashed into the World Trade Center. United Airlines Flight 175 departed Boston for Los Angeles, was hijacked and crashed into the World Trade Center. American Airlines Flight 77 departed Washington Dulles for Los Angeles, was hijacked and crashed into the Pentagon. United Airlines Flight 93 departed Newark for San Francisco, was hijacked and crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. It takes courage for individuals to come forward in situations like this, and I urge anyone with information that may be useful and helpful to authorities to use this opportunity. The Office of Victims of Crime has established a toll-free 800 number for family and friends of victims. They can call 800-331-0075 to leave contact information for a future time when more information is available, to find out information about a victim, or to find out information about the rights of victims and the services available to victim survivors and victim families. The determination of these terrorists will not deter the determination of the American people. We are survivors, and freedom is a survivor. A free American people will not be intimidated, nor will we be defeated. We will find the people responsible for these cowardly acts, and justice will be done.
Now some perspective on the day's events from NewsHour regulars, presidential historians Michael Beschloss and Doris Kearns Goodwin, and journalist author Haynes Johnson, plus Richard Norton Smith, director of the Dole Center at the University of Kansas, and Roger Wilkins, professor of history at George Mason University. Michael, has there ever been a day like this in U.S. history?
Not exactly like this, Jim. You know, you look at something like the Battle of Antietam, that was once called the bloodiest day in American history. That was 23,000 Americans killed. You go back to D-Day, probably about half that, Pearl Harbor a little over 1,000, so the magnitude is stunning. And the other thing is that, you know, there are moments in history that are really shocks to all of our systems. Pearl Harbor was one. After Pearl Harbor, no American could feel comfortable anymore that we were protected by those big ocean moats. That's a large reason why many Americans had been isolationist after Pearl Harbor. That wasn't possible anymore. And another thing I'm a little bit reminded of was the announcement by John Kennedy that there were nuclear missiles in Cuba. That, I think, was the first time that Americans felt that an escalation into a World War III, the incineration of the Northern Hemisphere, might be possible. So I think after today, this is going to be another shock. I think all of us have known intellectually that something like this could happen. Now we understand it emotionally.
Richard, do you think that's it? We're going to understand this emotionally now?
Well, I hope that's the beginning of what we do. I mean, to understand this emotionally is a prelude perhaps to understanding it intellectually and taking concerted and sustained effort based upon both. You can go back to the War of 1812, when the British actually occupied Washington briefly and destroyed the Capitol and the White House. You can think of times in the Civil War when the nation's capital was threatened with capture. But there really has never been anything on this scale. And another factor, too, thanks to the mass media, there's a global immediacy about what happened today. We heard Strobe Talbot earlier in this broadcast saying the world was attacked today, and I think that's absolutely true. One other difference, we've heard the Pearl Harbor analogy repeatedly throughout the day. One significant difference is on December 7th, we knew at the time of the attack precisely who was responsible. It didn't take us long to know what we had to do to punish those who were responsible. It took us 3.5 years to carry it out. This attack, on the other hand, even if we do identify those responsible, even if we punish them wherever they hide out, we still confront the fact that there are states that sponsor them, that provide them with safe haven. And even if we deal with that issue, we still have a Middle East which is festering with the hatreds which give rise to these acts of terrorism. So it's an extraordinarily complex, and in that sense, I think, a unique historical event.
You agree, unique historical event, Haynes?
Oh, absolutely. And I think what Richard just said is right, that Pearl Harbor, we know, was a terrible event. It galvanized the country, but you knew who the enemy was. You knew that
we were galvanized on
the attack,
somebody.
by the attack on Pearl Harbor. The country rose and united, and you knew exactly who the enemy was, and you forced right away the war had started, and you knew what we were going to do. And we were going to win the war, and that was this. This is them, it, they, terrorism, amorphous, wherever it's going to happen. And we're used now, we're conditioned, I'm struck too, with we see these scenes over and over again. We've had shocks through the television age, John Kennedy's assassination and all the rest. This one is different in a funny way because it's almost as if we knew it was going to happen, and we've seen Lockerbie, we've seen planes coming down, but there's never been anything quite as riveting as what we saw on those screens. Everyone alive will remember everything they saw today.
Amen to that, Doris?
Oh, I think there's no question that the event itself is unique. I think there probably are, however, parallels to the feeling of vulnerability that people felt who were alive at the time of Pearl Harbor. As Michael said, we had always believed those great oceans would protect us from any kind of air attack. Roosevelt had tried to warn us the previous May, in May of 1940 actually, that we were no longer safe because of the air warfare, but the isolationism kept up until Pearl Harbor. But I think the major difference, which has been hinted at, is that when Roosevelt went on to the Congress after Pearl Harbor, he had going for him not only that there was an enemy, but that the country had things it could do immediately. He could call for a quadrupling of production. Those factories could get going. People could put mattresses on their cars and go to where the factories were. Soldiers could join up to join in the arguments against what was happening eventually in Germany and at that point in Japan. So there was a sense of common action that we don't have easily at our disposal today.
And that results in what? A frustration?
Well, I think so. I mean, I think what happened, it's interesting, when you read about the reaction to Pearl Harbor, it was almost as if the indecision of the previous months was finally met by common action, and there was a relief in the country at large, and a sense that at least we knew as a nation we were going to move forward. It's hard to imagine what President Bush could say to make us feel that we had something to do. People gave blood today. I think that was the symbolic sense of wanting to do something, but most of us are not going to be able to contribute in a way that the military intelligence and the people who are going to have to go after these people are going to do. So that leaves us to a sense of impotence, and the sense of vulnerability gets increased because there's no way we can act. Action is the answer that people need when something like this happens, and it's hard to figure out what the country as a whole is going to do.
Roger Wilkins, what analogies leap to your mind today?
Well, I see this as the process and the maturation of America's sense of itself. We thought of ourselves originally as an innocent people and an invulnerable people because of
somebody said earlier, of not only our oceans, but a friendly neighbor to the north and a weak neighbor to the south. We're not invulnerable anymore, and we're not innocent anymore. We started learning those lessons in the Revolution. We certainly learned it, I think back to First Battle of Bull Run, when people from Washington went out with their picnics to watch the great Union Army chase the Rebs away, and the Rebs hit them in the nose. These people fled back to Washington, frightened to death. I think of our loss of innocence in Vietnam in so many ways. And each time, the world got closer to us, and we got closer and closer to what we thought of as the world's other human beings' problems. Well, today, what these people did was to let us know that our innocence and our invulnerability is over. There couldn't be anything more in your face than what they did. They took our airplanes, they flew them into icons of American industry and American urbanization, American finance. They flew it into our Pentagon, the heart of our defense, and apparently they were also going to hit the president's summer place.
Yeah, we should point that out, that the airplane that crashed in Pennsylvania, there are reports that it was headed toward, its target was to be Camp David, which is in Maryland, not too far from where the plane actually went down.
So I think this really gives us a test of our maturity. We've got to respond to this fast. We've got to respond to it very intelligently. And as Strobe Talbot and others have said, we've got to be fierce about defending at home our own freedoms and taking them very seriously and not getting hysterical about what has happened to us.
And yet you use the word frightened. Do we have a right to be frightened tonight, Roger?
Well, I think that a lot of the innocence that we had about hopping on and off airplanes, about complaining and moaning and groaning about having to go through these routine checks at the airports, the fears that we have for our relatives, my heart aches for the people who are waiting for news of their relatives who are on those airplanes, as well as for the other people who were killed. We're all going to think about that now. We'll never forget this.
Thank you all very much.
Trade Center disaster has occurred is closed, and it won't be open tomorrow at all. Well, without that guidance from the stock market, the markets all around the world, all interconnected, as we know, are looking for guidance. It's not there. The stock prices in Asia were plummeting today after that because, you know, again, it's such a shock. And some are likening it to the Gulf War, which led to a major recession around the world.
In fact, the Trade Center towers were really the heart of in this financial district that, you know, spans the globe. What kind of impact might this have long term, not just on, you know, destroying those towers, but to lose all those documents, to lose all this information and all these people?
Well, you know, I think the people aspect is what everybody's been focusing on, and rightly so. We just don't know from the other side of things how the markets will react. I mean, it seems to be two schools of thought here. Some say this is a long-term disaster, that it'll be very, very difficult for the markets to recover, that this could be the thing that sort of tips it over into a recession that we've been sort of flirting with for the last several months. But others point out that the markets have been very resilient, and that at times of stress it will look bad for a while, but as this country pulls together, so will the market, and that we will begin to see some sort of recovery. It's really too soon to say, that's just like we have to say about so much of this.
Our colleague Diane Sawyer was actually reporting a few hours ago and was talking about the fact that everywhere down there on that scene you could see financial records and papers, just everywhere you looked, you know, litter from this terrible, terrible explosion, documents that were so important yesterday and now have become just...
Yeah, so much of that, though, I think is also on computers and so forth. We just don't know how much is destroyed, how much is duplicated somewhere else. You just don't know. I mean, there's just no way for us to say what the sort of the tangible impact of this will be on the markets and the ability of companies to continue to do business once we begin to have the cleanup in place. Once people do go back to work in that part of town, we don't know how hard it's going to be for them to sort of jumpstart and get back to where they were before.
All right. Well, despite heavy damage at the Pentagon, thanks, Derek, despite that attack and despite damage and the fire burning and victims there, the Pentagon is scheduled to be open today. In fact, it is open as of now, even as officials deal with what appears to be a very high death toll. ABC's Jim Sciutto is outside the Pentagon. Folks working there even as we speak.
Absolutely, Elizabeth. Still active. And I think we have noticed a little bit less smoke in about the last hour, a sense that the fire is coming somewhat under control. There used to be 3 or 4 hoses spraying the roof of the Pentagon. Now we're just down to 1. Still a lot of smoke, as you can see, but noticeably less in the last hour. So a sense that they are making progress, at least.
Firefighters making headway in both the Washington, D.C. and in New York. Jim, how much of that building, or of that complex, in essence, will in fact be operational tomorrow?
If you can picture the Pentagon, as you know, of course, it's 5-sided. It has 10 corridors emanating out from the center, like the spokes of a wheel. Tomorrow, apparently between 2 and 6, quarter number 2 and quarter number 6, that area is going to be closed off. A little more than a third of the building closed off tomorrow morning, but the rest of the building up and running. And as we've talked about many times tonight, it's running as we speak. The National Military Command Center, where the Secretary of Defense was for much of the evening, he may still be there. Pentagon not telling us either way. Also, other offices. We spoke with someone who called us actually a couple of hours ago and said just in his unit alone, 500 to 1,000 people at work tonight. So a building that has been greatly damaged. The plane went 3 rings into the building. It's 5 concentric rings in the Pentagon, and yet it's still active.
All right, Jim Sciutto, thank you so much for that report. Demands for a swift and strong military response followed yesterday's deadly attacks. They came from, among others, former Secretary of State Lawrence Eagleburger, who spoke with ABC's Peter Jennings.
Afghanistan has been in a country in absolute turmoil, just riddled with violence for more than a decade, and the United States was party to that in many cases. What could the United States do now to a government in Afghanistan that would make life any worse for them than it is already?
By destroying that government, or by destroying the infrastructure of that government. Look, I understand that particularly in a case like Afghanistan, you have 150 years of this kind of instability. That doesn't mean, what it does mean, I think, though, is that if we're going to judge these issues precisely with the kinds of questions you've asked, much as they have to be asked, and we then decide because there is not a lot that can be done, that we shouldn't do anything, I think that's the wrong approach. And I think if the terrorists and the governments who house them are made to pay prices for it, and again, I can't believe that the government in Kabul would take kindly to having its government buildings blown up under them or over them. But I think there are things we could do.
You do mean, I gather then, among other things, attacking the capital of Afghanistan, Kabul,
if necessary, yes.
where the Taliban,
yes,
from which the Taliban rules, and perhaps a city like Kandahar, large city in the south.
If necessary, if we think it's,
if we think it will make on Afghan cities,
sir.
Full-scale attacks on Afghanistan
I would do it. Now, look, I understand. I'm one person saying this, and everyone else will be horrified by it. But the point I'm trying to make here is, I think we now need to understand that this is a war. We will have lost some tens of thousands of people, I suspect, and I think we must make it clear to the rest of the world that we're going to be, if you will, somewhat irrational in our response.
I mean neither to agree nor disagree with you. I hope you understand that, first of all, sir. But you are suggesting that the United States now fight on the same level as the people who have committed these acts against the United States.
You betcha. When you fight a war, that is what you do.
And you must be ready to live with the consequences of fighting. That's strong remarks tonight from former Secretary of State Lawrence Eagleburger. We go now to ABC's Rebecca Cooper, who is in Washington, D.C. Rebecca, you've been talking with some senior intelligence sources, I know, throughout the evening. Any idea yet how we, who are supposed to be the best in the world in intelligence, missed any sort of sign, any clue that this attack was coming?
Elizabeth, senior intelligence officials tell us that, in fact,
There were no specific signs that this was coming. In fact, not only were we not receiving any general threats, but we were at a lower state of threat than we had been in many recent weeks and months. So they say there were no specific threats, there was nothing that pointed to the time or place, and there was certainly not a heightened state of alarm within the United States. There had been some increased concern for American citizens traveling to Israel and other parts of the Middle East, but there were no concerns seen here in the United States. So now the concern becomes for the White House, for the Central Intelligence Agency, and other parts of the national security apparatus. What do they do to anticipate further attacks in the future, given that there were no signs that led to this?
And what is the answer to that? I mean, are they just trying to figure out how now to beef up intelligence agencies, connections, sources, that sort of thing around the world?
They have that challenge before them. Last night after the president's speech, he went immediately in to what's called the sit room, the situation room inside the basement of the White House. It's a heavily armored room that's like a bank vault, where he met with his national security officials and got a very frank and firm assessment of the situation from CIA Director George Tenet. And administration officials tell ABC News that following that meeting, they acknowledge they have the very real concern about how to do that in the future. They still have to determine once and for all who is responsible. Administration officials telling ABC News that all signs certainly do point to Osama bin Laden, and they have mounting evidence to make that case as the hours go by, but they're not ruling out other possible sources of attack. But they also have an additional concern, which is, if it is indeed Osama bin Laden, how do they retaliate? It's not a nation, it's a widespread terrorist cell. And as one senior terrorism official noted to me earlier, other than a bunch of mud huts, we don't know exactly who and what to attack. They don't know where Osama bin Laden is on any given day.
Although there have been several remarks tonight that from different sources in the administration and even comments from President Bush to the effect that countries providing safe harbor to these terrorists will pay the price. So even if we don't know exactly where Osama bin Laden is, if, and that's a big if, we determine that he is in fact behind this terrorist attack, they seem to be not ruling out attacks on whatever country is giving him harbor.
Exactly. You've done in your own reporting in the past, Elizabeth, the ever-present danger to American citizens traveling abroad. And there are several countries that American citizens have been warned from traveling to because they do harbor known terrorists. Afghanistan has been a country of real concern, and the United States has consistently warned them in the past that actions would be taken if they continued to harbor terrorists, but took no real specific action. We are now being told to expect all of that to change in the wake of yesterday's attack.
Indeed, I think safe to say life in the United States for every American will change after what has happened. Thank you, Rebecca Cooper from Washington. We'll be checking back in with you a little bit later. ABC's Derek McGinty, my colleague, is here. You've been keeping track of different stock market reaction around the world. Already markets having a tremendously adverse reaction.
Well, beyond the obvious human cost here, the tremendous human cost here, the other big casualty seems to be confidence. In Japan, the Nikkei average, which is their stock market, their Dow Jones, is down more than 6%, and it's because a lot of investors are running scared. Interestingly, gold, which is sort of considered the safe harbor, when things are bad, people buy gold. The price of gold is up right now. The dollar itself is a lot lower. One of the things to keep in mind was that several very important Japanese banks, in fact 31 of them, had offices in the World Trade Center. Those offices now obviously destroyed again. The impact is fundamentally on those tangible assets, but on confidence, which, as you know, is sort of the currency that investors trade in. And without it, we just don't know how the market will react. Again, the U.S. markets are closed today, Wednesday, and they will decide later today when to reopen them, if it will be Thursday, Friday, or whenever that will be, depending depending on what goes on.
All right, Derek, thanks so much. Authorities say the hijackings of the three planes that crashed in New York City and Washington, D.C., along with that fourth jet that went down near Pittsburgh, were closely coordinated, obviously, by these terrorists. ABC's Lisa Stark reports now on the timeline.
The first plane to crash into the Twin Towers was this Boeing 767, American Airlines Flight 11. The plane with 92 passengers and crew left Boston around 8 a.m., heading for Los Angeles. About a half hour into the flight, it made a hard left turn over upstate New York. There were violent changes in airspeed. The plane turned and headed toward Manhattan. It slowed and aimed right for the World Trade Tower. At the same time, this United 767, Flight 175, 65 people on board, also going from Boston to Los Angeles, is flying over Massachusetts. It turns toward New Jersey. The jet then makes a U-turn over the state, comes toward Manhattan from the south over Staten Island. It slams into the second World Trade Tower. Both planes were in the air about 45 minutes. Even before the towers are hit, this American Airlines 757, Flight 77, has left Washington's Dulles Airport bound for Los Angeles. It's believed the plane was in the air for over an hour before it destroyed a section of the Pentagon. This is all that's left of United Airlines Flight 93. It left Newark bound for San Francisco. It appears hijackers took control somewhere over Cleveland. The plane took a hard turn to the south. Then someone in the cockpit radioed that the plane wanted to change flight plans and head to Washington, D.C. It never made it, disappearing from radar, crashing south of Pittsburgh.
And there is, of course, speculation that that plane, hijackers had meant for that plane to go and crash in or near Camp David, again, crashing instead in the Pennsylvania countryside. Yet another airplane, aside from those 4 jets, had a close call yesterday. The pilot of TWA flight number 3, bound from New York City to St. Louis, came perilously close to one of the planes that crashed into the World Trade Center. ABC's Dean Reynolds reports the TWA pilot was told to take evasive action.
You dodged one of the aircraft that hit the tower?
Well, he was up there whenever we were coming from New York, so what we had to do was, they were not talking to him, and he was changing his heading and his altitude, so they just cleared us to deviate however we had to stay away from him.
It was right after they had taken off, and the passengers were horrified.
I thought we were going to crash. I thought the plane was going to crash, because when we took off, the plane kind of went down and came back up, it was kind of shaking. And it wasn't your normal taking off routine. And then you could just see like a plane that just kind of just bypassed us really close. And I said maybe it was just a mere miss.
We had him in sight, so it was a nice day in New York. We were out of the clouds, which helped a lot. So we just, dodged him.
As the TWA jet ascended, others aboard said they could see a terrible sight below.
Then when we got really high up, my brother's a fireman, and so I said, doesn't it look like the Trade Center's on fire? And he says, yeah, it does. It looks like a big fire.
All right, that was ABC's Dean Reynolds with that report. Obviously, the World Trade Center was on fire in a devastating way. We're going to go now to ABC's Allison Stewart, who is down near Ground Zero, where Bill Blakemore has been also standing by. Allison was able to spend some time in some area hospitals. As you can imagine, with a disaster this size, the effort to get the victims out and to get them help is enormous. Allison, you were able to spend some time at the hospitals. Where are the wounded being taken?
As far as I know, Elizabeth, the time I spent today was at St. Vincent's Hospital, which is at 7th Avenue and 12th Street. They're actually using 7th Avenue as somewhat of a corridor for all large tractors, trailers, ambulances. There's New York City MTA buses, which no longer have their routes on the top, but they say emergency call police. While I was down there, I spent several hours this afternoon, a phalanx of medical professionals volunteering their time, gurneys on the street, awaiting people to come in. But as everyone noted, that most of the people who are coming in earlier today were not the severely wounded who are unfortunately still in the rubble behind me. They were the people who were running and hit by debris. One thing I did note is that they were not taking blood donations any longer, but they needed donations of clothing. They were asking for people to bring clothing down to St. Vincent's Hospital for the people who had suffered burns or had lost shirts, shoes. They especially needed shoes, they said.
And they want people to actually bring those items to the hospital?
Yes, there was a large bin that said, "We need clothing donated," and that they would begin collecting blood again at 9 a.m. this morning.
Well, and in fact, I know that they were actually saying that many New Yorkers spent the afternoon lined up waiting to donate blood, what little they could do to help this in this terrible event. But at some point they were saying, look, what we really need is O negative blood and RH factor negative blood. Is that correct?
Absolutely, that's what they were saying as well, and it was amazing how they just pulled it together so suddenly, writing signs on the back of pizza boxes, the different lines for the types of blood written on garbage bags, paper garbage bags you get at the supermarket.
And what about the effort? We'd heard reports that MASH units had been established, or treatment units had been established, that people are being ferried from the lower tip of Manhattan to New Jersey across the river.
Actually, you know what? I haven't been at that part of any of the efforts. I've only been at the hospital and down here, Elizabeth.
I understand. Thank you so much, Allison. We'll be checking back in with you in just a moment. I'm sorry, we're going where? Okay, well, we're going to recap while we figure out what we're going to do next. The landscape of Lower Manhattan in the moments following the attacks was one of unimaginable destruction and terror. Joe Torres of WABC Television brings us this report.
You know, as reporters and as journalists, we are in the business of gathering news. And during events such as these, you've seen the video, you've seen the pictures, to try and cover it as best we can, we try and get as close to the scene as possible, thinking of the story, thinking of the viewers first, ourselves second. That was a mistake, and we almost paid for it. Let's go! Underground! I'm with you! Go, 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 go! 10 o'clock this morning, photographer Glenn Mayrose and I, along with FBI agents, police officers, fire officials, we all thought for sure a bomb was set to explode underneath our feet outside 7 World Trade Center. We took off running for our lives north on Church Street. We had no idea the top of one of the Twin Towers had just exploded. We ran 5, 6 blocks, Glenn lugging his camera equipment, videotapes, and batteries as a cloud of smoke, dust, and debris crept up behind us. People running, crying, and screaming, wiping tears from their eyes. Out of breath and unsure of what just happened and what we just experienced, we finally stopped, took a breath to make sure we and others were okay. We finally paused and talked to this gentleman, covered entirely in dust and debris. As others looked back in shock and horror, we started another interview with a Port Authority engineer who worked at World Trade Center and spoke to us about the strength and integrity of the skyscrapers. Then, suddenly, the second tower erupted right before our eyes.
Let's get ready,
Moments later, the frantic run up Church Street started all over again.
Report from WABC Television, Joe Torres, who was on the scene this morning when all that unfolded. Just horrific events that he witnessed and also experienced while down there. We want to show you once again the picture, the home video we got in here a few hours ago of the first tower of the World Trade Center being struck by that jet. A home video, somebody happened to be there. You can see it up there. Unbelievable. The commercial jet hits the first tower, explodes, and at that point, of course, pandemonium began. And then a few moments later, we've got the videotape, a second jet, while the first tower burned, a second jet hijacked, this is a United Airlines jet, bound for Los Angeles from Boston, crashing also again into the second tower of the World Trade Center. We now know that the FBI has singled out 2 brothers who were on board that flight as potential suspects. We have some videotape. Moments ago, the FBI seized a car, their rental car. The car apparently rented by 5 Arab men and parked in Boston Logan's airport. Was seized as evidence a few moments ago. You can see it being towed away right there. There is a report in the Boston Herald, I believe, Derek McGinty, you have it with you, that the FBI got sort of hooked onto these suspects because another passenger had gotten into an altercation with these men, noticed them, thought that something was suspicious, and inside that car, according to this report in the Boston newspaper, they found Arab language flight manuals.
Yeah, this is a source story from the Boston Herald, so we ought to emphasize again and again that we don't have independent confirmation of this information, but
we do have independent confirmation that the
car was
seized.
towed, right? But we don't have independent confirmation of some of the details they bring out here. But they are fascinating because the question everybody asks is, how could this happen? We've all been through the metal detectors. You got to take your keys out of your pocket. You can't bring your cell phone on without showing somebody that it actually is a working cell phone. How could someone get weapons on a plane under this level of security? Well, apparently, according to the sources in this Boston Herald story, they were ingenious about it. They had knife-like weapons hidden in shaving kits and embedded in razor blades and so forth that were in their carry-on luggage, things that would just go right through the X-ray detection equipment, and no one might notice that it was a possible weapon.
And in fact, the FBI, former head of the FBI in Boston, believes that Boston was the staging area for this incredibly sophisticated, stunningly choreographed terrorist attack. 4 commercial airline jets being hijacked nearly simultaneously yesterday morning as they were all taking off for long flights bound for California, laden with jet fuel that is highly flammable.
And planes that were didn't have many passengers on board, so that there was no sense that maybe a group of passengers could take over the plane again or attack the suspects and possibly thwart them. Interestingly, one of the planes took off from Dulles Airport, as we noted, the one that ended up crashing into the Pentagon. That plane was in the air for an hour. Well, if you're from the area, you know the Dulles Airport is maybe 2 minutes away from the Pentagon via airplane. So that plane circled around or moved, just stayed on course for a long time, waiting apparently for just the right time to smack into the Pentagon.
And other details in this newspaper report on how this attack had happened. And this has obviously also been confirmed because so many passengers were calling from cell phones. An American Airlines flight attendant was able to call American Airlines operations and say they were being hijacked, that stewardesses were being stabbed. And apparently there is speculation now that the hijackers began to kill the flight attendants as a ruse, a way of luring the pilot out of the cockpit, so that they could then storm the cockpit and take control. According to the report, also, we hear that one of the pilots was able to depress his key while he was communicating to air traffic control, and they were able to overhear the hijackers warning the pilot in English not to do anything foolish, that he would not be hurt.
Yeah, there's so much that we may never know from these planes because of what happened and whether or not they can recover the black boxes that were on board. But the flight that crashed outside Pittsburgh, that's the plane that something went wrong for the hijackers. There's something didn't go as expected. That's where we'd like to know maybe we could find out more about it if we could just get those details.
The FBI now also, thank you, Derek, the FBI is apparently also, because so many people were able to use their cell phones to call their loved ones from the airplane when it became clear that they were in terrible trouble. The FBI now backtracking and tracing all those cell phone records because they're going to want to go back and speak to as many of those people as they can to glean what information they can about what was happening and going on in the air. Up we have now some information helplines to call the FBI if you do have any information at all about anything about what might have happened. What might have led to this attack, who might be behind it. You can call 1-800-331-0075. For information on victims, call 1-800-331-0075 once again. This is ABC's continuing live coverage of the terrorist attacks on the United States. A massive rescue and recovery operation is still unfolding at the site of the World Trade Center. A devastating attack by 2 hijacked airplanes has reduced the Trade Center's twin towers to a perilous mountain of rubble. Fires are still burning at the Pentagon, where another hijacked plane caused extensive damage when it crashed into the Pentagon. You can see one of the Pentagon's walls has, in fact, collapsed. Reports are that flames are still burning inside. Crews are searching for possibly hundreds of victims there. ABC's Allison Stewart is down near Ground Zero here in New York and Lower Manhattan, where the terrible task of wading through this rubble and finding the victims is underway. Allison, I know that they've been able to stabilize the scene slightly. The fires are close to out now?
Apparently, Elizabeth, they have very few firefighters. This is according to Don Dahler of ABC's Good Morning America, that they have very few firefighters gingerly, tenderly walking over the rubble, listening for people. They are concerned there is some fire still burning right at the base of the area.
And the buildings at the scene were, for many, many hours, considered unstable. We did have that third building collapse late yesterday afternoon, and there was some concern as recently as a couple of hours ago that some of those other buildings were still unstable. Do you know if they've been able to make sure that everything is okay in that respect?
Apparently they are concerned about the Marriott Hotel. There is some fire burning in the Marriott Hotel right now, and they're worried about the stability of that building, Elizabeth.
And you came from St. Vincent's Hospital, one of many area hospitals where victims are being taken. What was the scene like there?
At St. Vincent's, I was there earlier in the evening. I haven't been there recently. It was a case of people wanting to actually volunteer. There were so many doctors and medical professionals who have come down, as well as an entire building for people who wanted, just civilians who were on the street and wanted to volunteer. I met a young Mexican man who said he was a medical professional during the earthquake in '85 there, and he just wanted to come down and help. There are people actually at the perimeter here who also want to help, but I have to tell you, Elizabeth, getting in here as a member of the press was quite difficult. This is locked down. The National Guard and the police are at every entrance to the tip of Manhattan today. It's quite chilling, and you realize how truly that this is a crime scene, and that's the way they're treating it.
It's an enormous crime scene, and the FBI will be combing through that debris as well, looking for evidence. And I'm sorry, can we tell me? Let's go check in now with ABC's Nathan Thomas, who's been monitoring events overseas.
Good morning, Elizabeth. All over the world, people have been glued to their television sets watching the horror in America and wondering how it's going to affect them. At the U.S. Embassy here in London, there was a candlelight vigil overnight. People far from home and trapped. All flights to the U.S. remain canceled. The British government feared a similar attack. They've closed the airspace over London. Some office buildings may remain closed again today here. Security is tight, as it is at embassies, U.S. embassies all over the world, which are temporarily closed to the public. In Moscow, people brought flowers to the American embassy. One man described what so many feel when he said he thought he'd been watching a science fiction film. The Israeli government declared a day of mourning. They began collecting blood to send to American victims. At one center in Jerusalem, a doctor said 150 donors showed up there in 2 hours. But in East Jerusalem, celebrations from the Palestinians and in Palestinian camps. They say they are very unhappy with the U.S. siding in Israel, and some say this is what the U.S. deserves.
Indeed, even as PLO chief Yasser Arafat condemned the attack, we saw videotape yesterday of Palestinian men and young boys actually cheering and elated by the attack.
That's right, but there is one commentator from the Mideast who said that many Palestinians, the people in the streets, are not really that many when you count all the Palestinians. Many of them are on their knees praying right now that it doesn't turn out that they or any of their people had anything to do with this attack.
It was interesting listening to Prime Minister John Major give his remarks yesterday evening, and he was talking about how an attack on one democratic free country is an attack on all democratic free countries, and in essence, it's a show of solidarity with the United States in this terrible hour.
It is, and that's been the response from many different countries, many of our allies. In fact, in London this morning, this is the picture that is probably on every newspaper in the United States and all over the world. But the headline on this is the day that changed the world. So many talk about war with the United States or something, but this one particularly says that this is something that is affecting not just the United States, but the entire world.
All right, Nathan Thomas, thank you so much for that report. And indeed, it is a day that looks like it will have changed the entire world. As yesterday's horrific events unfolded, it was difficult to keep track of exactly what was happening and where. ABC's John Donvan has pieced together this timeline.
We want to tell you what we know as we know it. We just got a report in that there's been some sort of explosion.
The first thing any television camera saw this morning was this. It was just before 9. Roughly 15 minutes earlier, an American Airlines jet hijacked from Boston had crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. There were 92 people on board.
I was sort of at my desk working, general office activity, and felt an enormous I almost felt like an earthquake. Like I could literally feel and see things in the office moving and the floor moving. Immediately after it was some sort of explosion or something, there was an enormous volume of debris and paper. It almost looked like a dirty parade. All of this material just falling down.
It does not appear that there's any kind of an effort up there yet. Now remember, oh my God,
my God.
That looks like a second plane.
Minutes later, the second plane, the second tower. The fireball ate up the aircraft. It was a United Airlines jet from Boston, 65 people on board.
As soon as he got hit, I was thrown to a window. So I was very lucky to get out. There's a lot of people that didn't get out. There's a lot of people coming down the stairs, burnt up. It's bad.
A big explosion happened. Some guy came out. His skin was all off. I helped him out. This is him all over. There's people jumping out of windows. I've seen at least 14 people jumping out of windows. It's horrific. I can't believe this is happening.
New York City was staggered, and still it wasn't over. Here in Washington, the Pentagon was now burning. Yet another hijacked aircraft, American Airlines Flight 77 with 64 on board, had crashed through the Pentagon's walls.
U.S. officials are saying there was no warning, no indicators of any kind of a likely terrorist attack. Number two, they say Pentagon officials within the intelligence and the counterterrorism offices are now looking at this very intensely.
Across Washington, ABC reporters were hearing officials use the word terrorism.
It seems obvious unofficially to people here that it was a terrorist attack, but they obviously can't reach any firm conclusions at this point. So the Pentagon is engaged, and I'm sure law enforcement is, but they say they had no warnings.
And around the nation's capital, a city full of potential targets, everyone was on edge.
Okay, there's been an explosion of some kind that shook the grounds of the Capitol. We all heard it. Everybody ran for cover. We don't know where it was. We don't see the smoke yet. Everybody's saying, get back. We're running, we're running, we're running, we're running. They're screaming at us to get back.
This was the president this morning.
Today, we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
Mr. Bush was in Florida visiting a school. At the White House itself, everyone was evacuated. Then the whole federal government was evacuated, every federal worker. And in Washington, it was instant gridlock. Go! In New York City, meanwhile, they were also evacuating. And suddenly, the towers began to collapse in on themselves.
Why are they pulling us out of here?
Because the tower's leaning.
The north tower is leaning. Right, Marty, quick. Oh my God, there it goes!
I looked up as soon as we got across the street. I looked up, I saw the tower start to buckle. I just turned and ran, ducked down, put a jacket over my head. 3 or 4 of us huddled together, and it was just black everywhere.
And with everyone asking the obvious question, how in the world, answers will be coming in fragments.
The American Airlines Flight 11, the 767 from Boston to Los Angeles, a flight attendant called the American Airlines Operations Center to let them know that 2 flight attendants had been stabbed and the perpetrators had broken into the flight deck.
Then, just before lunchtime, in a green field in Pennsylvania, one final crash. A United Airlines 757 carrying 45 people from Newark to San Francisco. Reportedly, a passenger on board used his cell phone to call 911 before the plane went down. The president's safety had become an issue.
We flew for a couple of hours on Air Force One at what appeared to be a very high altitude. We were not told where we would land until the time came. There were jet fighters accompanying the president's aircraft. He has been traveling, we are told, by Ari Fleischer, and he will continue to travel.
Mr. Bush reached Washington earlier this evening. Already, we have these images that no one can ever forget. A tough guy mayor pained by what he saw.
Right now? The situation is that 2 airplanes have attacked apparently.
Can't go to City Hall.
Why?
We should not go to City Hall.
All right, well then let's go north then.
The dust, everywhere the dust, and how it just wouldn't come off. A desperate choice by desperate people who had no way out.
We saw what we thought was debris and we realized it was people jumping. I can't do anymore.
Late this afternoon, another building weakened by the blast went down like a domino.
Finally, we clawed our way out over the rubble.
Yeah.
Come on down. You did all right.
At this point, it's hard to believe that all of this happened in a morning. Military jets are crisscrossing the skies over Manhattan. National Guard units are out. Washington is shut down. Airports in the U.S. and Canada are closed. And the death toll is still uncountable and unimaginable. John Donvan, ABC News, Washington.
5 seconds.
Unimaginable indeed. Even as you look at those images, you cannot believe your eyes. As we've mentioned, the headquarters of the United States military was also targeted yesterday. John Donvan just talking about that. But Pentagon officials are vowing to carry on business as usual there today. ABC's Jim Sciutto is live outside the Pentagon. Jim, I understand they've pretty much suspended any search and rescue efforts, and they're just focusing on putting out that fire?
That's right, Elizabeth. It's a matter of safety. They want to put out the fire. They also want to make sure that the building is not in danger of collapsing around rescue workers. It was described by the Arlington police chief, who's participating in this operation, as peeling away the layers of the building so that they don't have to worry about them collapsing later. And that's their first priority before they do search and rescue. He also said that even recovering some of the victims, some of the dead bodies, could take days because they're treating this as a crime scene, and those victims are part of the evidence of that crime scene. So it's a sense of the time it's going to take, not just to put out this fire going on behind me, but also just to clear the scene. Really, it's going to take some time.
And in fact, there was initially an estimate of maybe 100 people killed. Then a few hours later, the Pentagon came out and said it could be as many as 800 people dead. Do we have any clearer figure now or any idea at all on what our casualty count might be?
The figure, Elizabeth, came from, again, the Arlington fire chief, and what he did is he gave a range of between 100 and 800. But when he spoke last a couple of hours ago, he kind of backed off that 800 figure, just saying, listen, that's the high end, saying that the only thing they know for sure is that there were 67 people aboard the plane that crashed, and they know that they can almost assume that everyone on that plane died. Beyond that, it's just speculation at this point.
And even as they work to put out that fire and wait to search for more victims, work is going on inside the Pentagon. It is the nation's military headquarters, and this is a military incident. We are responding in a military way. We were talking earlier about the ships that have been dispatched. Do you have any more information on when the hospital ship, for example, might arrive, or the aircraft carriers that were going to be positioned off the shores of New York City, Washington, D.C., that sort of thing?
We asked the military, and they said for security reasons they are not going to say when those ships, the USS Comfort, a hospital ship, as you mentioned, out of Baltimore, as well as the USS George Washington, an aircraft carrier that's going to be used for medical purposes in New York, but they are not saying when they will arrive for security reasents.
All right, Jim Sciutto outside the Pentagon this morning. Thank you so much for that report. We'll be checking back in with you less than 2 hours after the hijacked jets plowed into the 2 World Trade Center towers. Both of them collapsed into pieces of rubble. ABC's Robert Krulwich has been reporting on the reasons behind the collapse of those buildings, that rapid, instantaneous destruction.
Why did the towers collapse as quickly and as suddenly as they did? Engineers from the original firm that built the towers told ABC they can only guess at this point, but they believe that the collisions themselves, the plane hitting building number 1 and the plane that smashed into building number 2, by themselves, they did not cause the collapse. It was the fire, they say, the intense fire and heat from the explosions that brought the buildings down. Temperatures inside could have built up to 1,600 degrees Fahrenheit. At that temperature, steel loses its strength and steel beams connect every floor to the outside walls. As it got hotter, the beams got weaker, and the hot air inside began to push and press against the outside walls until the outside walls just buckled, snapped, and released the top floor, which fell onto the floor below, and the entire building sinks in a straight vertical, the floors falling faster and faster down, until you notice that every floor in the building is gone. Viewed from another angle, you can see the same thing. Notice the aerial stays vertical, just stays straight as it sinks into the building. There's no buckling or tipping, just straight down. And this happened in both buildings. The first tower, too, stayed straight as it went down, each floor falling neatly on top of the other. So the reason the towers went so quickly is because all the floors were literally hanging onto the skin. And once the skin went, the buildings went too. Robert Krulwich, ABC News.
Indeed, the heat leading to the collapse of those two buildings, not the impact of those two commercial jetliners crashing into it. Derek, we were just talking about this. I'm joined by my colleague, Derek McGinty. You were wondering whether or not the terrorists knew that in fact, might be the structural reaction to this kind of devastation.
Exactly. Obviously, if you wanted to destroy buildings, this is just crashing the planes and was horrific enough, but the idea that the whole building would collapse afterwards would be something they want, but we just don't know whether or not. And does it really even matter what they knew? Just the idea that they do such a thing is awful enough, and awful enough, in fact, to inspire these headlines that we're getting from around the country. This from the Tulsa World in Tulsa, Oklahoma, I think pretty much sums it all up. Attack on America. You really can't overstate it. And the size of this headline, of course, states it about as graphically as possible. This one from the Atlanta Constitution, outrage. It just thousands dead, a nation staggered. That's what it comes down to. And I think as you look to the public reaction to this, as we look around in various cities around the country, it gets to fear, sort of an all-consuming fear of what the next target could or would be if these two or these three attacks were not the end of things. Where would they strike next? In Detroit, for example, you saw that they closed a tunnel connecting downtown Detroit to Windsor, which is another part of the area. Many office buildings, the Renaissance Center, home to General Motors, evacuated. Again, people worried, what will the next target be? If you go around to Miami, parents took their kids out of schools, government offices were shut down, government meetings canceled. Again, people worried, where could the next target be? No one knew. In Dallas, frightened companies and government officials evacuated office buildings. The Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, as we know, was closed, along with just about every other airport in the country. People worried that their area, their town, their large office building, their government center could be the next victim.
Indeed, and as we showed some polling data a little bit earlier in the evening showing that so many Americans worried that in fact there would be another terrorist attack. Many Americans worried that they themselves would be the victims.
I think the key factor here is, as we've seen in so many newspapers and editorials, that we felt very secure, despite the fact that there had been attacks here before. Nobody ever expected anything like this. How could you imagine?
衛星第一放送ではこの後も6時からアメリカで起きた同時多発テロ事件についてお伝えしていきます。続いて BS ニュース50を10分間お伝えします。
Was deeply involved in the Pentagon's top-to-bottom review of force structure, etc., something that President Bush and Secretary Donald Rumsfeld have initiated. This individual told me that that review of the military force structure and its capabilities and its spending habits and so on will not be at all affected by yesterday's events. And something of an irony, of course, in Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld the day before the attacks proclaiming at a major speech at the Pentagon that the enemy is within the Pentagon in the form of bureaucratic waste. Reporting live from the White House, James Rosen, Fox News, back to you in New York.
James, they're talking about the fact that that plane that slammed into the Pentagon actually appeared to be first headed for the White House. Are you hearing anything new about that there on the White House grounds?
Pretty much the same reports that you're hearing, John. A, that plane that wound up slamming into the Pentagon was originally intended for the White House, and B, the plane that crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, might have been intended as a second follow-through attack upon the White House, similar to the way we saw two planes attacking at the World Trade Center. This is unconfirmed. The White House is really giving very few details so far about who they think is responsible, what kind of retaliatory measures they expect to take, and also the logistics of which planes were intended to hit where and everything. Right now focused
focused, of course, on rescuing those people who may still be trapped alive beneath the wreckage of both the Pentagon and the World Trade Center. John?
All right, James Rosen at the White House. Thanks. Okay. And back upstairs now to John Gibson.
You know, John Scott, everybody is wondering how these hijackers managed to take over these 4 planes. Joining us now, Governor Jim Gilmore of Virginia, whose credentials in this area, if I've got it right, Governor, are that you are a former intelligence officer and you are a member of a special commission designed to figure out what we should do about domestic terrorism. So, let me ask you, if you've got hijackers armed with nothing more than the kind of small knife a person is allowed to take on an airplane, or a razor blade, a box cutter, or a plastic knife. In other words, hijackers whose weapons are below the radar of our detection systems, what do we do then?
Well, John, I think we have to simply be mature about this and recognize that terrorism's great strength is that they choose the time and the place and the method of the attack. I chaired this commission on terrorism, weapons of mass destruction, and domestic response. It's been a 3-year commission. We've already issued 2 reports. And in our very first year, we assessed the threat and thought that while a nuclear biological attack was possible, it was unlikely, but a conventional attack like this one was highly probable. And I think all of us today are really troubled and disturbed and very saddened by this attack upon innocent men and women. But the terrorist does this for the purpose of creating shock and trying to change the nature of the community that they're attacking. And I believe that America is changed. I believe that we will go to a place now where we will be very resolved, that we will recognize that people who are our enemies, who arm and state that they wish to do us injury, place themselves in the positions of being enemies of this nation. And I think that the president is going to be very concerned about that, and his decisive leadership is already beginning to be evident.
Governor Gilmore, we got about a minute until New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani is going to hold a news conference describing the rescue efforts down at the World Trade Center where the 2 towers collapsed. But let me just ask you, before we have to go to that, is it time for America to go back to armed sky marshals on every plane that takes to the air in the United States?
Well, I think that the people of the United States want to see every possible action taken to make us as secure as possible. But the answer is going to be many reforms that we have proposed in our commission. We think that we need to re-empower our intelligence community. Many of the things that they should have been able to do were taken away from them many years ago. We have to have a national strategy that deals with also federal and state and local responders. We have to have a national strategy, and we have to go to work doing that. There are many efforts that we're already making to be secure. We should be unstinting in those efforts. But we have to focus our attention on the people that wish to do us harm and recognize that if they declare themselves to be armed enemies of this country, that we should act decisively to defend the nation, as under international law we have the right to do.
Do I hear you supporting, in a tacit or oblique way, pardon me, Governor Gilmore, if you wouldn't mind standing by. Let's go now to a briefing being held by New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani on the rescue efforts down at the World Trade Center. Let's listen to the mayor.
Good morning. We just completed a long meeting with all of the agencies of the city, state, governor, participated in it, and the Port Authority, so that we can work on the things that we have to do today to, first of all, focus our efforts on recovering as many people as we can and save lives. Second, try to begin the removal of debris to that area of the city, which is going to be a task that goes on for at least 2 or 3 weeks. And then focus on the other issues that are of importance to the city. Make sure that food comes into the city, make sure that people are able to go about their lives and are taken care of in the hospitals, and to try to bring the city back to normal as soon as possible. And we're going to aim to try to do that for the rest of Manhattan starting tomorrow. And we'll be focusing on that and trying to accomplish that all day today. We have been successful in recovering at least one other person, Port Authority police officer. We're hopefully going to be able to recover a 4th one, and we're in the process of doing everything we can to try to locate other people, and that'll be the major focus of our attention. We also appeal to people that may have private videos of the occurrence since some came forward late yesterday and last evening. If they do, please contact the police department and the FBI, because it could be of enormous help in the investigation of the case. We're going to try to open schools tomorrow. We're hopeful that we'll be able to, we certainly will be able to do it in the entire city, and we'll be working on a plan for the maximum number of schools that we can open on the east side of Manhattan, particularly the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Con Edison is working I think as intensely as they possibly can to try to get power restored. It's going to take some time, and we're bringing generators in. The governor made available to us a group of generators that we've moved to Randall's Island, and we will be using them in that area of the east side that needs generator power, because they may need it for quite some time. We were able to move 120 dump trucks out of the city last night, which will give you a sense of the work that was done overnight. So some of the debris has already been removed. More of it is being removed, and it'll be done by barge all throughout the day today. The subway system is operating in all of the city, but below 14th Street, and largely because right now we have that closed. So if you're in any of the other 4 boroughs, public transportation is normal, the subways are normal, the buses are normal. If you're in Manhattan, the subways are going to be working to 14th Street, and then for those that go underneath, they'll just go straight out to Brooklyn. As soon as we can get that area of the city open, however, there will be subway service there, except for the 1, 2, and 3 lines, the West Side IRT below 34th Street, because of the collapse that took place. And again, we ask all New Yorkers to cooperate and to try to help each other. There are going to be a lot of people today who need help and need assistance, either because of the fact that they know people that were lost in this terrible tragedy, or because they're just frightened of what may happen. If you could comfort them and help them and assist them, particularly elderly people, that might be a way in which you can contribute. And we're getting very, very close cooperation from the state, from the federal government. I think people in New York, the best way they can deal with this right now is not only to deal with their own grief, which we all feel and have, but to show that we're not going to be in any way affected by this, that we're not going to be cowed by it, that we're not afraid, that we're going to go about our business and lead normal lives and not let these cowards affect us in any way like they're trying to do, which is to instill fear in us. Governor?
Mayor, thank you. As the mayor indicated, the focus right now is still on search and rescue, and the hopes that we can get other people out of the debris and save more lives. We have, at last count, 18 different search and rescue teams down there. And I want to thank my colleagues. We have 8 from Connecticut that Governor Rowland sent in, others from around the country. We have a specialized team coming that Governor Calderon is sending from Puerto Rico. And it's this type of support from around the country that is allowing us to get through this. I have to tell you, I was down at the scene last night, and Mayor, your police and fire not only were heroes at the beginning, but they're still heroes. They're down there under enormous personal strain and risk. I saw them at the ground zero while a high-rise was on fire right across the street that could have collapsed, and they are risking their lives to try to save their friends and their colleagues and the New Yorkers who are still trapped. And we have to thank them, say a prayer for them. This is a time for rescue, it's a time for commitment, but it's also a time to reflect and grieve for those who didn't have their parents come home last night, or for those who still might be lost. And we will get through this because, as the mayor indicated, New Yorkers come together in times of crisis, and we've seen tremendous spirit donating blood, volunteering at hospitals, helping us to get through this. And we have done everything we could to be supportive. We have National Guard troops here now. We are mobilizing fire departments from Westchester and Rockland that are backing up in the Bronx. We're mobilizing fire departments from Nassau and Suffolk that will help in some of the outer boroughs on Long Island. But what we don't need are people just simply coming in to volunteer. We have the hotlines, we have the organization, we have tremendous coordination between the city and the state and the federal government. So people who want to exercise their expertise. Whether they're firefighters, they should contact their fire department. If they're EMTs or nurses, they should contact the hotline that we have set up at the state, where we've already had about 10,000 calls. So this is a tragic episode in American history, but New Yorkers will get through this. America will get through this. We will not be intimidated. We will not lose our freedom.
What is the status of the World Trade?
One other thing that we should do. These are the flight recorder boxes that the firefighters and the police officers and the rescuers are looking for, and we're going to we'll give you copies of this. We'd like you to put it out as broadly as possible. We're giving copies to all the rescue people and recovery people, so that they can try to find them. Altogether there'll be 4, 2 for each airplane, and that's what they look like, except it'll be obviously covered with soot and dirt. But there are a lot of people involved in the recovery and relief effort who know what they're looking for, and then there'll be some that don't. So if we can give those out, it would be very important. This morning's meeting was devoted to the relief and recovery effort, largely. This afternoon, we're going to focus on the economic recovery of the city and work with the hotels, the restaurants, the real estate industry. We're going to rebuild. We're not only going to rebuild, we're going to come out of this stronger than we were before. And in addition to having wonderful people in New York, as the governor indicated, we also have the strongest business community of any place in the world. And we're going to call upon them, and we're going to need their help. But we're going to come out of this emotionally stronger, politically stronger, much closer together as a city, and we're going to come out of this economically stronger too. And we're going to start working on that right away.
What's the status of the World Financial Center? There appears to be a fire burning across the street now, fairly significantly.
I believe. You want to answer that, Rachel, of the FBI?
The smoke from the World Financial Center was from a defective generator that the fire department worked on. There was no major fire at the World Financial Center.
A statement from the FBI? The FBI?
I'll make a brief statement. Obviously, as you all know, this is a pending criminal investigation. I can tell you that it is being coordinated by Director Mueller at FBI headquarters. We have essentially all 56 field offices in the country involved in this. There are primarily a dozen offices where the airplanes were hijacked and left. We're doing a lot of things as far as at those particular airports, checking on the planes, checking with crews, cleaning people. All of that is ongoing as we speak. Probably the major thrust that we are doing right now is we do have the manifest. We're reaching out to all of the families, interviewing them, and the primary purpose of that is obviously to get any information. You have had, in the media as reported, there's been a number of calls made from these various planes. We would like to put out to the people, if they haven't reported that to law enforcement, to call their local law enforcement or FBI so we can get a hold of it. The obvious thrust for us right at this particular point in time is to identify the number and the individuals who were in fact hijackers. So that is the major thrust. We will be doing a crime scene. The primary thing is, as the mayor just pointed out to you, is the black boxes. We're working with the city, but again, that's going to follow the search and rescue, ongoing intensive investigation. That's all I have at this time.
Can you say anything about the arrest in Florida and the seizure of a car in Florida and the seizure of a car in
We have a number of leads that we're running around the country. A number of these, I'm not going to get into specifics other than it's my understanding we did detain some individuals over in New Jersey. Essentially, we are finding out that that is not all that relevant at this particular point in time, but I'm going to limit my comments. That is going to any of the investigative news pertaining to this investigation will come out of Washington, D.C.
Is there anyone in custody at this time? Is there anyone in custody at this time?
Other than the ones that I just mentioned to you, there are some over in New Jersey. That's the only.
Mr. Mon, can you explain to us, Mr. Mon, how
airports, airlines that have been hijacked could come into the New York area without being detected by radar, without the route that they were taken being questioned by people in Transcon or radar?
I can't really answer that. That would be FAA and NTSB. I'm not going to get in. I don't know the answer to that.
Did you have any warning at all that there were hijacked planes in the air?
No, I can tell you this was a surprise. As the mayor and the governor has pointed out, it was a surprise, a shock. We had no forewarning of this happening.
Mr. Munn, there were reports that the FBI was investigating a hijacked plane just before the first plane hit the World Trade Center. Is that true?
I'm not aware of that.
Do you have any sense at this point of the range of potentially of people that were in the World Trade Centers and that are still missing or presumed dead? What is even the conceivable range that there is at this point?
The numbers that we're working on are in the thousands. Obviously, we hope that's not the case, but the estimate would be for both of the buildings that although building number 2 had a chance to clear out, a lot of people probably cleared out of building number 2. Building number 1 had some time to clear out, but there were areas of it that were affected. The best estimate that we can make, relying on the Port Authority and just everyone else that has experience with this, is that there'll be a few thousand people left in each building.
Mr. Mayor, you talked about...
And then our recovery relief efforts and our work with the medical examiner are premised on those kinds of numbers.
Mayor, can you explain, if there are thousands of bodies and there were 120 trucks of debris taken out, where are the bodies if there's only 41 confirmed fatalities? Where are the rest of them?
A lot of the debris that was taken out are structural things that were in the way of the relief effort. I don't know that the debris was actually taken out of the actual buildings that fell. But if some of you haven't been down there, but the area was very constricted by lots of structural damage and things that were in the street. So a lot of the debris that was taken away, I suspect, was the debris that blocks the entry and exit of the vehicles that have to go in and out of there. Altogether, I think so far, we account for about 45 bodies.
So are the other ones still buried in the debris?
I imagine that that's the case, yes.
Are there still sounds of life? Are the rescuers hearing with listening devices? Are they still hearing signs that there are people alive?
The rescue workers do have listening devices. They also have dogs with which they're searching. And we're making every effort to get the people out of there.
Are there indications that there are people alive, though? In other words, are they hearing things with the listening devices, or are the dogs hitting on scent?
I can't say at this time.
Is there any way to approach the area through a
Is the city
tunnel?
still on a heightened state of alert today?
Absolutely,
And
yes.
how long will it remain in effect as far as the emergency?
It's going to last until further notice.
Commissioner, could you explain to us why there are so many trucks around?
The World Trade Center, putting the towers back up as a symbol of anything right now?
There's no question we're going to rebuild. I can't say that we know the exact nature yet of how we're going to do that, and we'd like to meet with lots of people.
Any belief that the skyline will be whole again?
The skyline will be whole again. Exactly, what will be there, I think we have to leave to giving some people some time to consider it and to think about it. And also, the reality is that the people in New York City are going to be whole again. We're very, very strong.
Is there any sense of the cost at this point, and the state, the city, the federal government is paying for the relief efforts?
Governor?
In my view, that's the last thing you think about at this point. We're not concerned about who's picking up the tab. We're just doing everything we can to try to make sure the relief efforts are the strongest possible. And we'll sort out the costs and the economic consequences later.
Is there any way to try to approach through the subway tunnel to perhaps people trapped in the areas below? Is that conceivable to do? Is that I have no idea. Is that something that could be tried?
Excuse me?
Is it try to approach through a subway tunnel to get perhaps?
They're looking at every access area to that area, the rescue workers.
Has that been tried yet? It's hard to know.
No, specifically, I don't know, but I'm sure they're looking.
Last question. Mr. Mayor, could you tell us?
The police officer and where he was trapped? How he was trapped?
We now join the chaplain
of the Senate as he prays along with members of Congress as they get about ready to open a session. Okay, unfortunately, as you can imagine, with the amount of stuff going on here today, we don't have that sound, but a session of Congress is about to get started. The chaplain presiding over a prayer right now. I'm Paula Zahn reporting from New York this morning. I wanted to quickly bring you up to date on what the city of New York is facing this morning. Mayor Giuliani just held a news conference along with the governor of New York, George Pataki. They say their goal right now is to rescue as many people as they can and to save lives. The good news, according to Gary Tuchman, and these numbers go back and forth, you need to understand that it is very difficult to get confirmation of this, but Gary Tuchman has gotten closer than any other reporter to the perimeter area of the World Trade Center. He has had confirmed for him by some city officials that in all 9 people have been rescued from this horrendous rubble you're looking at right now. 6 firefighters, 3 police officers, and there is hope, Leon and Darren, that 2 more people will be rescued sometime this morning. Leon, Darren?
Paula, thank you very much.
Good morning, Paula.
I'm Darren Kagan at CNN Center in Atlanta.
And I'm Leon Harris as well. Good morning, folks. You're now looking at a live picture we're getting from the House. This historic joint session of Congress about to get underway.
As they attempt to fill the gaping holes left in the fabric of this nation, send forth your Holy Spirit upon all the members of Congress, the President, and all government leaders across this nation. Free them of fear, any prejudice whatsoever. Remove all doubt and confusion from their minds. So with clear insight, which comes from you and you alone, reveal all that is unholy and renew the desire of your people to lives of deepening faith, unbounding commitment, and lasting freedom here, where liberty has made her home. We place our trust in you, now and forever. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain. The Chair has examined the Journal of the last day's proceedings and announces the House's approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the Journal stands approved. The Speaker at this time will lead the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Due to the events of yesterday, the Chair wishes to announce that the joint meeting to receive the Honorable John Howard, Prime Minister of Australia, scheduled for today will not take place. The Chair wishes to acknowledge, however, the presence of the Prime Minister here today and extends on behalf of the House his appreciation for the solidarity of the Australian people and the presence of the Prime Minister today in this very difficult time. Thank you. This time, the gentleman from Texas wishes to be.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to announce today's schedule.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, as you have directed, the House is convening now. We will stay in session from now until 11 o'clock, where members will have time for 1 minute. At 11 o'clock this morning, we will take a recess until 12:30 while the chamber is cleared. Members of the body will be invited back to the chamber at 12:30, at which time we will have a member briefing on the floor that will last until 2 o'clock. At 2 o'clock, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Gephardt and I will call up by unanimous consent a joint resolution to condemn yesterday's terrorist acts. That resolution will be addressed by this body under that unanimous consent request with an understanding that we will continue to address it until each member of this chamber has had ample time to address this issue as he or she sees fit. I want to thank all the members of this body for their patience, their commitment, their understanding, and their resolve during this trying time. And let me assure you, Mr. Speaker, by the time the 435 members of this body have spoken today, the world will have no doubt about who we are, what we will stand for, and what we will not stand for. And I yield my time.
We're listening in on the House of Representatives. Over the next hour, they will each be spending 1 minute each talking about and condemning the violence that hit the United States yesterday. They will then gather at 12:30 for a briefing that will take place behind closed doors, a briefing on the investigation into the violence and the terrorist attacks on the United States. We'll go back to this. Our coverage continues with Leon.
Yeah, you know, in addition to the words that the congressmen are saying today, the symbolic message of business going on in Washington is the main message they are trying to give to the world right now. In New York, however, it is a little bit more than business as usual there. Let's go down and check in with our Martin Savage, who's there at Ground Zero. He's at the World Trade Center down there on the ground this morning. Marty?
Leon, we just finished a tour that was put together by the New York Police Department and the Fire Department that allowed members of the media to get right up to the epicenter of what is this great tragedy, not only here in New York City, but throughout the world. It is hard to imagine that the Twin Towers soared at one time 110 stories. All we could count of one of those towers was about 7 stories. It was cut off. There is a huge mass of twisted steel and concrete that really, really drives any sort of depiction as you try to explain it. It is smoldering and smoking and burning. And one of the things that strikes you as you get so close to the heart of this is how quiet it is. In part, the reason for that is the tremendous amount of ash that covers the ground as if there had been some huge volcanic eruption. It muffles everything as if you were in the middle of some giant snowstorm. Instead, though, it was something far more treacherous and far more tragic. Many of the crews and fire teams that you see there are standing around. There is only limited access. There is only very minute efforts that they can make for fear of moving in any way the huge pile and possibly forcing it to collapse more. Those that have been working on that pile say the incredible thing is how deep it goes, because of the collapsing floor and floor and floor actually drove the building deep into the basement, some believe even beyond. We also saw robots that are being brought in, small track-like devices that obviously they hope to use to sneak through any sort of crevasses or any sort of voids that may hold the opportunity for life. There was not jubilation when there were those that were rescued from the pile. Instead, it was very somber, it was very quiet, and they realized there is a lot more work to be done. Leon?
Well, Martin, have any of the officials that you've spoken with given you any sense of how realistic it is that they will find more survivors today?
Those that you talk to say that they believe there is still a chance. However, when you walk up to the building, when you see how great the devastation is, it is not only clear to a viewer's mind, but also clear to those that try to rescue. The chances are increasingly slimmer and slimmer. Still, there is hope, and the work goes on, and the two combined are what are inspiring the rescuers today. Yeah.
And Martin, how about the situation with the fire? Any idea what it is that is continuing to burn some 24, 25 hours later, and how soon they think they can get that fire out?
Well, it is hard to say because the math is just so great. It's perhaps the fact that everything that was in the building is now smashed deep into the ground. and that there is a lot of material that is still possible to burn, and with the fire not being directly exposed to air, it's more smoldering than it is. You don't see leaping flames, you don't see open flames at all. So it appears that that's part of what's at work. Also, you have to remember there were several hundred automobiles and vehicles that were in the area that were crushed and demolished. And there, too, you have rubber tires that are burning. There was even a threat of gasoline and diesel fuel that they were worried about. So there is plenty of material that is left to burn, and it still does burn in a gray-brown smoke that rises above a drastically changed New York skyline. Yeah.
And it also means there's plenty of sad but urgent work to do as well. Martin Savage reporting live for us this morning from the World Trade Center, from what used to be the World Trade Center. Darren.
And as rescue efforts go on in New York City, rescue teams also standing by at the Pentagon, and that's where we find our Bob Franken. Bob, I understand you have some new information for us.
Well, several things. First of all, of course, this is a story so huge, and we talk about it in terms of institutions, when really this is the story, the human story as it is in New York, it is here too. CNN's Pentagon producer, Chris Plant, has just walked through the Pentagon, through a substantial portion of it. And he had some interesting things to report. You can see, of course, where the plane collided with the Pentagon a little bit over a day ago. Well, now that the firefighters have spent that day trying to put out the flames, he's reporting that they have not been entirely successful. And as a matter of fact, the fire has spread a little bit. The plane hit on one of the outer rings, as you can see, but Chris Plant reports that it has now spread to the inner rings. It's gone around to my left, your right as you're watching, and you can see that the flames are going in that direction. Plant reports that there are actually some fires still in the roof area, and that the area around the inner ring has some spot fires, that type of thing going on. That, by the way, has been confirmed by some of the firefighters who have been out here. We are also told that the entire Pentagon, all floors of it, seem to be at least covered in soot, and there's a smoke on the walls throughout all of the floors of the Pentagon. As a matter of fact, even the areas that were not directly affected, like the secretaries' areas, have been in effect abandoned. The secretaries, the leaders of the Pentagon, have gone down in the basement where they're operating right now, and of course trying to keep the military operation going. As far as the search for the casualties here, it's very dangerous right now. We're told by the people who are in charge of that it is so unstable they can't decide whether to try and knock down the wall where the plane hit or restabilize it somehow. These are the decisions that are being made. It's very, very risky now. When they do go in, it's very dark. They worry about tripping, and they worry about a collapse. So this is a story of individual courage. It's huge as it is. It's a number of individuals trying to see just how successful they can be, finding somebody who survived, although one fire official told me highly unlikely, but he said, we're not going to give up. That would be despair. Leon?
Actually, it's Darren. Bob, you mentioned the talk with the firefighter, but is there any indication that people might still be alive inside the Pentagon?
They have found nobody yet. They have found that there are some bodies. They have not been recovered. There are really a wide variation in the number of casualties we'll have. The best guess is it might be 100 or less, but the estimates have gone much higher than that. Thus far, no sign of survivors, particularly in the area where the plane hit. None are expected to be found, but there, in fact, have been some casualties spotted, not removed, but spotted.
Bob Franken at the Pentagon. We'll be checking back with you throughout the morning. Right now, back up to New York City and Paula.
Thanks so much, Darren. I just wanted to quickly recap for you what we know at this hour. As we've been reporting all morning long, all the public schools are closed, the private schools, the parochial schools are closed. But the Securities and Exchange Commission has now told CNN that the SEC chairman believes that the financial markets will indeed open for trading on tomorrow. However, an official decision has not been made at this moment. Right now, I want to go to Gary Tuchman, who is as close as you can get to what is left of the World Trade Center for an update on rescue operations underway. Gary, what do you got?
Well, yesterday morning at this time, the tallest buildings in New York City, the second tallest buildings in the United States, stood in the street just a couple of blocks behind me. And now the skyline here on this street, Church Street, looks like it did back in 1971, before the World Trade Centers were built. That beige building was there in the early 70s and the late 60s and the 50s, and that's what it looked like if you were here in New York City before that. It's a very strange sight indeed, not seeing those gleaming 110-story buildings behind me. We just saw a very disturbing sight on this area where we're standing. These are all emergency workers here right now, police. We have members of the military who are here. We have other emergency officials. And just a couple of minutes ago, you're going to look right now. This is one of the disturbing sights. There you see a car that was incinerated in the parking lot of the World Trade Center. It's very hard to look at those sites and imagine what happened to the people who were nearby. We've seen a lot of cars like that today. This truck right here that just passed by has wreckage from the World Trade Center, but an even more disturbing sight about 5 minutes ago, we saw a vehicle from the medical examiner's office carrying body bags. We can tell you we haven't had any good news whatsoever in the last couple of hours about survivors, but there have been 9 survivors found. And with us right now are 2 of the gentlemen who worked with one of the survivors. Gentlemen, can you come over here for a second? This is Brian Van Flander. This is Steve Martinez. They're emergency medical technicians. I want to ask you, Brian, you told me that you loaded up onto an ambulance a police officer who survived this terrible tragedy. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I was going to say, as a transit authority officer, we worked on them for, when I say we, I mean the EMS, the firefighters. Those guys were just incredible down there. They worked on him for a better part of 4 to 5 hours. He was only extricated maybe an hour and a half ago. And the reason it took so long was because they were trying to save his foot. They were very worried that they were going to have to amputate his foot, and they were able to save it.
So they were worried they were going to have to amputate his foot while he was still in the wreckage?
Yes. We actually, as I understand it, and I didn't actually get the chance to see him in the wreckage.
You put him in the ambulance?
That's right. I loaded him in, or helped many guys load him in. They crawled down into, he was in a pit, and they had to crawl down next to him or beneath him and physically cut a cable that had punctured his ankle, as I understand it.
Was he talking to you as you put him in the ambulance?
He was lucid. He was aware. He wasn't. He was talking, but not. Kind of thumbs up. There was a nice big round of applause as we got him on the stretcher, and then again when we got him into the ambulance, and people were. It was very tearful moment, a very touching moment. Kind of shows the best of New Yorkers. I mean, these guys are just working their hearts out. They're trying to save their fellow colleagues.
Also touching what you have in this box. Show me what you have in it.
Yeah, well, we found this at Ground Zero. There's 3 command stations. We're at Liberty 1, which is about as close as you can get to Ground Zero without being in a pit. And we found her just lying outside amongst the rubble. The carnage, I know you guys hear everyone coming out of here saying the carnage is unbelievable, but it's just beyond comprehension. You cannot possibly imagine the devastation down there. And this kind of tells a story unto itself.
Tell me what you're going to be doing with this.
Well, I'd like to clean it up and give it to a young girl in memory of the people who died, and maybe when she's old enough she can appreciate.
Hard for you.
Yeah, a lot hard.
How are you coping right now, sir?
I'm all right. I'm fine. It was rough in there, We went in. Basically, we provided EMS services for the fire department and the rescuers, the people who were digging. They were having a hard time breathing, having a hard time seeing with their eyes.
You can see that the rescuers have their masks that they wear. Yeah. Anyone in this area is supposed to be wearing these masks.
Yeah, so there's a lot of crap floating around in the air, and it's rough in there. We had firefighters pass out on us. So we had to give them oxygen, things like that.
Are you scared?
Yeah, it was scary a few times in there with the fire and all that. Then there was one point where they thought they had found somebody, so they called EMS in, and we ran in. And that's when we really got a really good look at it, because from the outside, it's a lot of hilly rubble, and you don't get to really see it unless you're in there digging. And when they called EMS in, we ran in and actually really got to finally see what it looked like, and it was just chaos. It was chaos, and also it wasn't nothing but a couple of DOAs down there that they took out.
Dead on arrival. Gentlemen, a country thanks you for your service. We appreciate it. We have one more gentleman over here. If you can come over with us, sir. This is a member of the Guardian Angels, the crime prevention group, who was crawling through the wreckage for many hours. Can I get your name, sir?
Bill Coscarelli.
Bill, tell me what your experiences were at the site just a couple of blocks behind us.
Well, like he was saying before, my mayor scene was yesterday night. When the fire went down a little bit, I started to get into the buildings, over the basements, over the fire station, looking for people. I have a hard time finding people that want to come with me. Finally,
I mean, would-be rescuers who wanted to come?
Yeah, rescuers or firefighters. The firefighters that were mainly on top of the building. Basically, nobody wanted to leave the top of the building. I went on there. I went to the path train. Basically, I went to the station.
Which is the commuter train in the bottom level of the building.
Yeah, exactly. I went all the way down to the station looking for people.
What did you see, sir?
Everything is, I mean, it's no roof. It's basically, it's nothing left from the building. It's a 60 feet hole where the building collapsed, and everything is there.
Sir, I want to thank you for joining us and talking with us. Appreciate your help. You can see it's an extremely stressful, very troubling situation. They are hoping to find more survivors, but right now, officially, we know a total of 9 survivors have been found. Paula, back to you.
All right, well, it is absolutely chilling to hear these first accounts of what it is like for rescue areas to go into ground zero. As you may remember from last night, rescue workers weren't even allowed into the area till very late because of concerns about debris continuing to fall, the fumes that continue to come from the crash site. We will, I am sure, continue to hear more of these horrifying accounts of what it is like for the rescue workers that are going in there. We do need to make it clear there has been some positive news this morning. Some of those very brave rescue workers have, in fact, according to Gary Tuckman, rescued some 9 folks trapped inside the rubble, 6 city firefighters and 3 police officers, and the hope is that 2 more victims trapped inside the rubble will be rescued. One of those victims actually establishing cell phone contact with a family member. It is hard to imagine, by looking at these pictures, that anyone ever could have survived the strength and the force of this kind of attack. But the mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani, expressing the hope that there might be more people trapped inside the rubble. We know from FEMA Director Joe Alba that 8 specially trained crews, urban rescue crews, will be on the site at some point later today to assist all the paramedics and the rescue workers on the scene right now. The mayor unable to give us any sense of what kind of fatalities we're looking at. All he will say is that the numbers will be very, very high. One city official telling me those numbers could climb into the thousands. I wanted to remind everybody that President Bush is in the process of meeting with his cabinet secretaries, and we are hoping that sometime within the next 45 minutes or so, at what is expected to be the conclusion of these meetings, that we'll have a little more information for you on that. So from New York, let's go back to Leon in Atlanta.
All right, thank you very much, Paula. You know, so many of us had thought for so long that the Twin Towers were invincible. We had heard for so many times over the years that the buildings had been built to withstand an impact from a crash of a plane. Well, let's talk right now on the telephone with Aaron Swirsky. He is in Jerusalem, and he was one of the original architects of the complex. As I understand it, is that the case, Mr. Swirsky?
Yes, I was working with Minoru Yamasaki, which is the architect of the building, but I was one of the workers with him, and we were a team of 14, 15 architects, and I was one of the members of the team, yes.
Well, as a member of the team and having such insight into how this building was constructed, could you believe that a plane could bring these buildings down?
No, as a matter of fact, one of the rationales of the structure of the building was that it would be built as a pipe, and that proved itself to be a worthwhile thing in the explosion of 1993, when a hole was brought into the building. It survived, but somehow nobody could foresee anything like that. At that time, also in 1962. The planes were not like this type of planes that we have now. There were, I think, the biggest plane was a 100-passenger plane, something like that, and and the fuel capacity of those planes were not like it's today. And the criteria was that if a plane hits it, it would go right through it. And I mean, so nobody could foresee something like that, and that the tower was protected in such a way that the damage would be limited to one story, but it wouldn't travel to the other stories.
Well, then let me ask you this then. Can you draw in your mind any distinction between the two factors here? Which made the bigger difference, the size of the plane here or the amount of fuel that the planes were carrying?
Excuse me, I lost the connection.
Sure, I understand. You're saying that the planes that were in design or that were in use at the time these buildings were designed were smaller planes. They only carried 100 passengers or so. The planes that crashed yesterday were much bigger than that. They were 767s or 757s.
And also the fuel capacity, it's much more tremendous. I mean,
exactly, and that's what I want to ask you about. Which was it that made the biggest difference? Was it the impact felt from the larger plane, or was it the heat that was generated by the burning of that much fuel?
Well, I imagine, you know, when I saw the pictures of the implosion of the buildings, it looks like the fuel must have leaked right through the core of the building, and from there, you know, the massive explosion is what caused the building to collapse. So it was something completely unforeseen as far as the design criteria was.
Let me ask you one final question, if I may. Considering what you know about the building, you say it was constructed like a pipe, these two buildings, and the manner in which we saw them collapse, does that give you any hope at all that perhaps the way it collapsed, there will be more pockets inside at the bottom where survivors could be found?
Well, I sure hope so. We pray that there will be survivors and that this won't happen again. And I mean, it's a terrible, terrible, incredible tragedy. Yeah.
Aaron Swirsky, we thank you very much for your insight this morning.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Take care. Darren.
Leon, yesterday's events hasn't just shocked people here in the U.S., people all around the world. And when something like this happens to a member of NATO, the entire organization takes action. NATO has just wrapped up a meeting in Brussels, and our Andrea Koppel's at the State Department in Washington, D.C. with more on what NATO members had to say about yesterday's events. Andrea.
Darren, far away from the scenes of carnage in this country, in a very different setting in Brussels, we're told by both diplomatic and State Department sources that the member states of NATO are right now sitting in a room going over a draft document. That this is the first time in NATO's history that they would do this, that would give the United States an upfront guarantee that if and when they're able to figure out who in fact was behind yesterday's attacks, that NATO, all 19 states, would guarantee the United States any kind of military support it needed, whether it be logistical, intelligence, the right to fly through their airspace. All of this would be taken care of and would be in the waiting. It would be at the ready for the United States if it chose to ask NATO for its support, that NATO would in fact then give the U.S. that support. And this is being discussed right now at NATO headquarters, the first time it's being done under something known as Chapter 5 of the NATO Charter, and it's something that Secretary Powell, in fact, alluded to this morning when he said that he spoke with the head of NATO, Lord Robertson. He also spoke with the head of the United Nations, Kofi Annan, and with the head of the EU, Javier Solana. So right now, Darren, the United States, with the help of its European allies, member states of NATO, are laying the groundwork for a possible military retaliation if and when the U.S. is able to determine who is behind yesterday's attacks. Darren?
Andrea, this would be hugely significant. Basically, as I understand it, it would be NATO saying to the U.S., if and when you decide to retaliate, we're giving you a green light and the support to do whatever you feel is necessary.
Absolutely. This would be the first time in NATO's more than 50-year history that anything like this has taken place. Remember that during the crisis in Kosovo and the Balkan War, most recently, this took place off NATO soil. These were not member states of NATO. This is the first time in NATO's history that one of its 19 members has been attacked directly on its own soil, and for that reason, we're told the United States is getting the backing of NATO, and they're discussing this draft document right now that would lay the groundwork up front for the United States to use all of NATO's various military intelligence and whatnot, all of its resources to attack, if that decision is made, those responsible. But again, they need to make sure, first of all, that this was not something that was homegrown here in the United States, but in fact something that happened or was directed from overseas. And that's certainly what we've been hearing both President Bush and Secretary Powell allude to, that their intelligence is leading them to various places overseas.
And once again, this would still be at the discussion stage, Andrea?
Well, right now we're told there is a draft document that is on the table right now in Brussels that all 19 members are discussing, and it's our understanding from both State Department and diplomatic sources that this is something that could very well be approved in the very, very near future in a matter of hours.
All right, we will have you track that. Andrea Koppel at the State Department. And now back up to New York and Paula.
Darren, I'm actually going to focus my attention on a development out of Boston this morning. The Boston Globe is reporting that investigators in Boston have found a copy of the Koran, a videotape on how to fly commercial jets, and a fuel consumption calculator in a pair of bags that was apparently meant for American Flight 11, which of course crashed in the World Trade Center yesterday. The Boston Globe said that the suitcases belong to a man with an Arabic name who investigators believe was one of those who hijacked the plane and crashed it into the World Trade Center. Right now, I want to check in with Bill Delaney to provide some perspective for us this morning on this story. First of all, is the Boston Globe the only one going with this story?
Well, actually, it's the Boston Herald, in fact, Paula, that's been leading the way on this story as hundreds of federal, state, and local investigators fan out to try to determine who hijacked these planes. It was the Boston Herald, their entire staff of dozens of people thrown into this yesterday, who broke a lot of this important news this morning in their overnight edition. I have with me one of the reporters on that staff, John Wells. John, what did the Herald learn about the hijackers involved in these two planes that eventually crashed into the World Trade Center?
Well, what we learned rather late last night is that authorities have identified 5 suspects of Arab men as possibly involved with this, that 2 of them may be brothers. Another 2 of them apparently traveled into Boston from Portland, Maine, originating, authorities think, in Canada, and that they also seized an automobile here at Logan Airport out of the central parking garage, a Mitsubishi sedan. And apparently within the sedan were pilot training manuals, or a manual that was in Arabic. This is what we're told by reliable law enforcement sources here in Boston, which, you know, it speaks to there's some roots to this in Boston, which not many people are aware of, but it speaks to the idea that there may be a terrorist cell in Boston.
It was in the late 90s, the FBI said earlier this year, that there was a small, possibly just 2 men linked to Osama bin Laden here in Boston. What can you tell us about that?
Well, yeah, there are 2 men. They're both cab drivers who have been, have alleged ties to bin Laden, who lived here in the 90s. One of them has since been killed in Lebanon. The other one has a death sentence over his head in Jordan, I believe. And they were linked around the time of the millennium. They were gone by then, apparently, from Boston, but they were linked to some plotting around the millennium for terrorist bombs in the U.S.
A security source I spoke to this morning, I must say, because we do have to be cautious about these reports, somewhat scoffed at the idea that someone who was heading to a hijacking, who was going to fly that plane, would bring with him a manual about how to fly an airplane. What do you make of that?
Understandable that he would have that reaction. This is raw information that we're getting from reliable law enforcement sources. We're not in the business of selecting out things that seem unlikely. You know, he may be right. I don't know. We're going with the best information we have right now, and things are changing quickly.
Why Boston?
Well, there's a lot of speculation about that. geographic location, close to New York, close to Canada. If this is true that there is some cell that's linked to a cell in Canada, a cell here in Boston, that's logical because travel is easy from across the border. I think that there's been talk also about that Logan has a spotty security record. So there's been speculation that terrorists would think this is a good place to stage something like this, although there's been no information regarding that.
The FAA in the late 90s finding some 136 security violations here, fining the airport $178,000, a spotty record at Logan.
Yeah, and I'm hearing today also that, you know, Logan workers are coming out and on the radio talk shows and talking about how horrific they feel the security is there, and that they've known it for years. And one of them said today that he comes to work at Logan Airport at 5 a.m. He could drive a tank in here. This is how some of those workers feel. So there's clearly a problem that needs to be addressed. Obviously, a little bit late.
John Wells of the Boston Herald, thank you very much. This still unfolding story. As I said, hundreds of investigators fanning out to try to determine how hijackers hijacked the planes that crashed into the World Trade Center yesterday that originated tragically in Boston. Back to you.
Bill, it's interesting now that you have both the Boston Globe and the Boston Herald essentially reporting the same thing. I also found it interesting that the head of the the aviation director of the Massachusetts Port Authority is saying that when Logan reopens, that, quote, there will be very significant security changes, including no more curbside luggage check-in and a ban on anyone except registered passengers passing checkpoints. That sounds to me that the spotty record that you were talking about was, well known and well established.
It's been a problem here for years, I have to tell you. They also have had their security successes here, but there have been notorious cases. For example, 2 summers ago, a teenager managed to get over the fence surrounding Logan Airport. He was dressed as an Hasidic Jew. He got over a fence with razor wire on top of it. He went to a 747, got into it, and made his way all the way to London, a notorious case here 2 summers ago. So yes, Logan has had problems over the years. On the other hand, even the FAA report from about 2 years ago, which blasted Logan, said that for a major airport, the violations here were really no more serious than they found at many other major airports. Logan Airport has problems, so does virtually every major airport in the United States. So we shouldn't brand them completely, but yes, it's conceivable that if there was a cell here that was spending time in Boston, examining the place, laying the groundwork for all this, that one of the incentives for being here in the first place was an airport that any of us who travel through it regularly will tell you has its weak points, has its checkpoints that it seems rather effortless to get through. Frankly, we've often commented on it ourselves as we fly in and out of Logan Airport.
But Bill, I got to tell you, that doesn't give flyers out there a great deal of confidence if you're saying that no one wants to brand Logan as particularly much worse than the other airports. The fact remains that hijackers were also able to hijack planes out of Newark and out of Dulles yesterday. And I know from talking to folks on the street earlier this morning, there's a sense of outrage that this could happen, that 4 hijackings could take place in a couple-hour period. Are you getting, I know that John Wells was saying that he's talked to workers at the airport who say that they aren't surprised this happened, but what kind of buzz are you getting from Boston residents about this?
It's the buzz that you hear all over the country, and it's the simple question, how could this have happened? But added to that question, I will have to tell you, and I have spoken to a lot of people in this town in the last 24 hours, Logan is something that comes up here. People go in and out of this very busy airport. There are some 28 million passengers a year in and out of Logan, and many of them have stories to tell of problems here. A colleague of mine, for example, once was in a ladies' room at Logan Airport, found a knapsack, reported it to security officials. Security officials said, yeah, maybe we should look at that, but why don't you call this number and see what you can do about it? They didn't go and even examine this knapsack that was left. And as anyone who's traveled through European airports or Middle Eastern airports knows, they're extremely careful about bags left unattended. So there's a history, an anecdotal history at least, of those sort of problems here. And again, I want to stress, the Federal Aviation Administration, in its examination of Logan back in the late 90s, blasted the airport, but said in the same report, this major airport is no worse than any other major airport in the United States. A paradoxical and disturbing conclusion about how safe it is to get on an airplane in the United States.
Bill, before I let you go, you cautioned us not to come to any conclusions about these 5 suspects who the Boston Herald is reporting have apparently been identified. The reporter you just interviewed described them as Arab men, possibly brothers who might in some way been involved in the planning stages of this attack. Once again, let's make this very clear to our audience. No one obviously can definitively link these 5 men in any way to Osama bin Laden or definitively link them to whoever launched this attack.
No, these are strands at this point, let's be very clear about it, that are being pulled together. On the other hand, law enforcement officials will tell you here that it has all the earmarks of the sort of thing we're talking about. Law enforcement officials here will say quite definitively that they believe that there was some kind of a cell obviously set up here for a period of time, because how else could this have happened in the first place? Let's not forget, 1, 2, but probably more like 8 or 9 individuals hijacked 2 airplanes here yesterday. 2 airplanes from 2 different airlines. 2 different airlines in 2 separate terminals. It happened within 15 minutes of each other. Both these planes left within 15 minutes of each other. So in the space of 45 minutes or so in boarding this plane in 2 separate terminals, they were able to do this simultaneously. So none of this is definitive yet. This is very early on. But as I say, law enforcement officials say you put 2 and 2 together, it's not completely unreasonable, along with the kind of splendid reporting by the staff at the Boston Herald and other newspaper sources here, and sources of our own security sources who all agree it has all the earmarks of the sort of thing that someone like Osama bin Laden could have been behind. Let me add, however, I did speak to a security source this morning who said she felt that people were getting a little too carried away with Osama bin Laden. She scoffed, as I mentioned in my conversation with John Wells, at the thought that there would be, all too conveniently, she felt, a training manual in Arabic in a car.
Sure.
Why would a pilot bring a training manual in Arabic that allegedly told him how to fly a commercial airline? It sounded fanciful to her, and she did say that she felt people were getting a little bit carried away. But I will add, on the other hand, law enforcement officials say you put 2 and 2 together, and it does seem to add up to 4. As far as a cell having been organized here in Boston, laying the groundwork for what seems to have all the earmarks of the sort of thing someone like Osama bin Laden could have put together.
Well, I appreciate your clarifying that for us, Bill, because what you've just reported is extremely disturbing, and I can imagine, based on what you're reporting and what the Boston Globe and the Boston Herald is reporting, you are going to be, I think, in the crossfire of where most of the major new developments are coming from. We really appreciate your insights. Thank you. And now we're going to go back to Leon in Atlanta.
Yeah, Paul, I mean, as you know, throughout the morning, we've been checking reaction from around the world. We want to show you this picture that we're getting in right now from London. You're looking now at the Prime Minister's residence there in London, number 10 Downing Street, the residence of Tony Blair. And as you can see there, the British flag there is flying at half-staff, a symbol that, once again, that country is walking shoulder to shoulder with the U.S. and sharing their grief and offering their condolences at this time. We're also seeing a similar scene at the U.S. Capitol. You see there on the top of the Capitol building there, all the flags there as well, flying this morning, half-staff, while that joint session is underway right now in Congress. Let's stay in Washington while we have that picture up and check in with our Kelly Wallace, who is standing by at the White House, where, as we understand, President Bush is involved in some meetings right now with his cabinet and security officials. Kelly.
Absolutely, Leon. The president meeting with his national security team. That includes Secretary of State Colin Powell, his national security advisor, Dr. Condoleezza Rice, Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld, CIA Director George Tenet, as well as others. That meeting began at 9:30. It's expected to end just moments from now, at which point we will hear from President Bush. It will be the first time we are hearing from him since last night when he went before the nation. This to be the president's getting his up-to-date briefing on the latest on the investigation, as well as the search and rescue efforts. Two goals really for the administration, Leon, today. One, to show that the U.S. government is doing everything it can to help with recovery efforts in New York, in Pennsylvania, and at the Pentagon, and that investigative teams are deployed to places like Boston and San Francisco and L.A., again, to do everything possible to find those responsible. Ari Fleischer, White House press secretary, talking to reporters a short time ago, not commenting, as U.S. officials have not been doing so far publicly, about this investigation, just saying that the full resources of the U.S. government involved here. We did get, though, Leon, a little bit more about the president's involvement. He was in the Oval Office at 7:05 this morning, and he reached out to a couple of world leaders, calling Canadian Prime Minister Jean Chrétien and British Prime Minister Tony Blair. Ari Fleischer saying those leaders expressed the resolve to stand united against terrorism. And interestingly, I think we're just about to hear from President Bush now, Leon. So let's go to that if that is about underway. Oh, okay. Sorry, misinformation. Anyway, Leon, back to you. I know the president also calling yesterday his father, former President George W. Bush, aboard Air Force One, an interesting conversation, and also reaching out to Solicitor General Ted Olson, who, as we've reported, lost his wife in one of those crashes yesterday. Leon, back to you.
Terrible situation there, and we understand that his wife was able to make a cell phone call from that plane as well. Thanks, Kelly. We'll get back to you once we do hear word from Mr. Bush. Darren, over to you now.
Meanwhile, a lot of people wanting information about how this investigation would take place, how government authorities will get to the bottom of who carried out these attacks. Let's bring in James Woolsey, former CIA director from 93 to 95, also a former ambassador. Mr. Ambassador, good morning, and thanks for joining us here.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
Any clues you're hearing as more information becomes available that is giving you an indication as to who might be responsible for these attacks?
Well, of course, there's a lot of information that points toward bin Laden's group, and that's understandable. Bin Laden has been advertising himself now for some time, issuing fatwas, religious declaratives, condemnations, making videotapes, quoting poems, having his subordinates all talk about how they're going to be carrying out major terrorist operations against the U.S. So it may well be the case that bin Laden's group was instrumental in this and, in fact, carried it out. But one wants to be careful using the word behind it, because there is at least some possibility that someone else was behind it. This was a very complex operation, and the possibility that there was a state sponsor behind or working with bin Laden, such as possibly Iraq, I think has to be investigated. There's a book out late last year by Laurie Milroy called Saddam's Study of Revenge, about the possibility that Saddam was behind the 1973 World Trade Center bombing, and that Ramzi Yousef, who was the mastermind of that, was involved with Iraqi intelligence. That information has been poo-pooed to some extent by the Clinton administration.
Mr. Ambassador, I'm going to have you hold on one second. We want to go live now to the White House. President Bush speaking with members of the cabinet. Let's listen in.
Intelligence updates. The deliberate and deadly attacks which were carried out yesterday against our country were more than acts of terror. They were acts of war. This will require our country to unite in steadfast determination and resolve. Freedom and democracy are under attack. The American people need to know we're facing a different enemy than we have ever faced. This enemy hides in shadows and has no regard for human life. This is an enemy who preys on innocent and unsuspecting people, then runs for cover. But it won't be able to run for cover forever. This is an enemy that tries to hide, but it won't be able to hide forever. This is an enemy that thinks its harbors are safe, but they won't be safe forever. This enemy attacked not just our people, but all freedom-loving people everywhere in the world. The United States of America will use all our resources to conquer this enemy. We will rally the world. We will be patient, we'll be focused, and we will be steadfast in our determination. This battle will take time and resolve, but make no mistake about it, we will win. The federal government and all our agencies are conducting business, but it is not business as usual. We are operating on heightened security alert. America is going forward, and as we do so, we must remain keenly aware of the threats to our country. Those in authority should take appropriate precautions to protect our citizens. But we will not allow this enemy to win the war by changing our way of life or restricting our freedoms. This morning, I am sending to Congress a request for emergency funding authority so that we are prepared to spend whatever it takes to rescue victims, to help the citizens of New York City and Washington, D.C. respond to this tragedy, and to protect our national security. I want to thank the members of Congress for their unity and support. America is united. The freedom-loving nations of the world stand by our side. This will be a monumental struggle of good versus evil, but good will prevail. Thank you very much.
I'm seeking a formal declaration.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Live,
Please. Thank you. Thank you.
Everyone who stepped
You guys
out.
Congress in a clear way.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. We'll take live, please. Let's go, guys.
Thanks.
It doesn't appear as if President Bush is going to take any questions from reporters in the room. He is meeting at the White House with members of the cabinet. We just listened to him live, the first time the country's heard him speak since he addressed the nation last night. The president saying that the events of yesterday were more than terrorism. It was an act of war, an attack on freedom and democracy. Also saying that America now faces a different enemy than ever before. Let's bring back in former CIA Director James Woolsey. Mr. Ambassador, I understand you were listening right along with us to the president.
Yes.
When the president says this is a different enemy than ever before, what does he mean by that?
Well, he's talking about terrorists, and particularly, I think, a group like bin Laden's, and I thought the president's address was eloquent and stirring even, but he used a word, harbor, which he used last night. A harbor for terrorists might be, say, the Taliban regime in Afghanistan, but there may be more involved than harbors here. There may be a government other than a harbor, such as the Iraqi government, that is orchestrating this to some extent, funding it, working closely on it behind bin Laden or some other terrorist group. And I very much hope that the Bush administration, unlike the Clinton administration, will not set aside this possibility and assume that everything is just a terrorist group, even a terrorist group as major as bin Laden's. It really needs to look carefully at the possibility that there may be state sponsorship here, and I think the most likely, certainly not the only possibility, is Iraq.
So to look outside the box, in other words, the terrorists might be geographically in one place, but the funding might be coming from someplace very different.
Possible funding, possible direction, possible support in the form of intelligence organization assistance to the terrorists. There are all sorts of possibilities. This was the original theory of the chief FBI investigator, Mr. Fox, of the World Trade Center bombing in 1993. But the government prosecutors turned away from it a couple of years later, and the Clinton administration turned away from it, turned toward the theory that this was all just loose associations of terrorists, and then later bin Laden. I hope the Bush administration will go back and take a fresh look and consider at least the possibility that there could be some state sponsor involvement here.
James Woolsey, Mr. Ambassador, former CIA Director. Sir, thanks for your time this morning, and thanks for your insight as well.
Thank you.
Leon.
Well, the investigations into what happened here and who's responsible are well underway, and we understand that we're just being told now that the FBI is going to be having two different press conferences, one at Boston Logan Airport and another one at Shakespeare, Pennsylvania, which is the site of that one plane crash, excuse me, just south of Pittsburgh. And once those do get underway, we'll check them out. But in the meantime, let's go now to our Washington Bureau where Kelly Arena, our justice correspondent, is standing by. Kelly?
Well, Leon, there are many threads that are being pulled together here to try to get at exactly who did this. And I'll start with the fact that intelligence sources tell CNN that at least 2 phone calls were intercepted by the United States after the bombing. Now, they believe that the conversations were between members of the group, the Al-Qaeda organization, which is backed by Osama bin Laden. During those conversations, there was talk of hitting 2 U.S. targets. This is one of the pieces of evidence that points to Osama bin Laden, doesn't prove anything, but that is part of the investigation. The second thing is that we did hear from the Justice Department earlier that it is a good guess that there were between 3 and 5 hijackers on each of the planes, and at least one of the hijackers must have been trained professionally to fly commercial aircraft. We do know that law enforcement sources tell us that part of the investigation involves looking into checking the flight manifest, the passenger lists, and cross-checking those with names that have attended flight school to see if there's any correlation between the two. They're also looking at facilities that offer simulation training, flight simulation training, to see if there's anything that matches there, because they say that to fly state-of-the-art equipment like we have on our commercial aircraft, you had to be trained either in the United States or in Europe, and so they are busy doing that. We do know that the investigation we heard earlier has intensified in 2 areas. In Boston, where there was a car that was impounded by law enforcement with, we are told, suspicious materials, but also in southern Florida, where law enforcement sources confirmed that there were several search warrants that were attempted to be delivered this morning. There was some information on flight manifests as well that pointed to possible links with Osama bin Laden sympathizers in South Florida, but unfortunately none of those search warrants were able to yield anything. I was told the quote is, it's pure vanilla so far, meaning there's no solid investigative leads, but investigations are intense in both Boston and South Florida, Leon.
All right, great. Thanks much. Kelly Arena in Washington. Now, let's go up to New York. Paula.
All right, thanks so much. I don't have a whole lot to report here right now, Leon, except to say that there is still some hope that 2 men trapped in the rubble of the World Trade Center are expected to be rescued. If you add that to the 9 that have already been rescued, that including 6 firefighters and 3 police officers, your total would come to 11. Now, the mayor of this city held a news conference a short while ago where he expressed his goal to try to get as much rubble out of the area, and of course the first priority to see if there are any more victims trapped alive in this rubble. Now, the city is still at somewhat of a standstill today. The major stock markets are closed, public schools, private schools are closed. All businesses south of 14th Street, which is 20 or blocks away from here, are closed. Several inbound bridges and tunnels remain closed at this hour. You look at these pictures of the rubble, and it's stunning to think that paramedics and the special urban rescue teams that have been brought in will have success at rescuing even more people, but that is the expectation. Right now, I want to check in with Christiane Amanpour for the latest reaction from Britain. And before I get to that, Christiane, I wanted your reaction to part of an interview I did with King Abdullah earlier today, where I asked him a series of questions as to what role he thinks U.S. policy in the Middle East might have played in the U.S.'s vulnerability to the attack. And at one point in the interview, he said if peace had been achieved in July, or an accord had been reached in July of 2000, this might not have happened. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, Paula, clearly anti-American feelings in the Middle East have been on the rise since the Intifada, which started in Israel and the territories 11 months ago. This is clear. Moderate Arab countries have warned the United States that this was happening and that it has been happening, and Arab leaders have seen their people take to the streets over the months of the Intifada, demanding that something be done on behalf of the Palestinians. And also, you've had guests guests on your programs this morning, notably Dennis Ross, the former Middle East peace envoy and chief negotiator, who confirmed that anti-Americanism has been on the rise, and those kinds of sentiments are more pronounced now than they have been perhaps ever. On the other hand, the same people, Dennis Ross and other experts on these matters, say that it is not necessarily about there not being a peace agreement. They point out that in 1993, when the first attack was conducted on the World Trade Center building, that was at the height of the peace process, when it had just started, really, the Oslo process, and the governments of the Middle East, the United States, were all fully engaged, including the Palestinians, in trying to come to a peace agreement. Many people believe that despite the anti-Americanism that is palpable now on the streets of the Middle East, that it is not about having no peace agreement, that the terrorists who planned and meticulously carried out this catastrophe, they believe would have done it peace agreement or no peace agreement, because they are against the peace agreement in any event. They have spoken out clearly against the Oslo process, Paula.
Christiane, if you would come back to you for more British reaction to the massacre that was unleashed yesterday. Right now, I want to go to the floor of the Senate, where the junior senator from New York is addressing her colleagues.
Chuck has, and all of our colleagues in the House, by the strong support we've received from the President, and I am very grateful. We've expressed our appreciation. Chuck and I will be going to New York this afternoon with FEMA, and we could not ask for more than we've received in the immediate aftermath of this horrific attack. But we are by no means anywhere near the end of what it will take to continue the search and rescue efforts. We are finding people even as we speak. Yet we know that there is a very grim task ahead, to do everything we can to find every person, to account for every single person who went to work. That's all they did. They went to work on a beautiful September day in New York. We will also stand united behind our president as he and his advisors plan the necessary actions to demonstrate America's resolve and commitment, not only to seek out and exact punishment on the perpetrators, but to make very clear that not only those who harbor terrorists, but those who in any way, any aid or comfort whatsoever, will now face the wrath of our country. And I hope that message has gotten through to everywhere it needs to be heard, that you are either with America in our time of need or you are not. We also stand united behind our resolve, as this resolution so clearly states, to recover and rebuild in the aftermath of these tragic acts. You know, New York was not an accidental choice for these madmen, these terrorists, these instruments of evil. They deliberately chose to strike at a city which is a global city. It is the city of the 21st century. It epitomizes who we are as Americans. And so this, in a very real sense, was an attack on America, on our values, on our power, on who we are as a people. And I know, because I know America, that America will stand behind New York, that America will offer whatever resources, aid, comfort, support that New Yorkers and New York require. Because the greatest rebuke we can offer to those who attack our way of life is to demonstrate clearly we are not cowed in any way whatsoever. I hope that within a short period of time, Senator Warner, we see scaffolding on the sides of the Pentagon. After we finish the search and rescue and recovery work that is being carried out heroically there, I hope we all see a clear signal that we are rebuilding, that our defenses are more resolute than ever. And I hope, similarly, that Lower Manhattan has the same kind of image to project, because the reality will be that we are rebuilding and reconstructing and making clear that just as our military might is unchallenged and uncowed, so is our economic, our social, our political values epitomized by New York.
All right, there you see at the Junior Center from New York, Hillary Clinton pointedly talking about what needs to be done to confront these terrorists that launched these multiple attacks against the U.S. yesterday, making reference to the indomitable spirit of New Yorkers and the collective strength to rebuild. Not making a reference to what President Bush just made an announcement of, which is requesting immediate funding from Congress to deal with the rescue efforts and the cleaning up of the debris. So that is the very latest from here. Darren, I want to go back to you and just make one more quick note about what rescue workers are telling us. Once again, they have every reason to believe that 2 people trapped in the rubble will be rescued, that they will be found alive, and if that is true, that would bring the total to 11 of all of the victims who have been successfully brought out of these horrendous ruins.
And Paula, as those efforts go on in New York City, I'm sure thoughts and prayers from across the country and around the world going to those rescue workers trying to save more lives. Another development in this story, earlier this morning, CNN received word that there were possibly planes in Canadian airspace. And of course, this would go against the shutdown of airspace across the U.S. and Canada. Let's bring our David Ensor in. He is in our Washington, D.C. bureau. David, do you have any more information on these planes? Were they flying? And perhaps did they have permission to do so?
Well, we understand from Canadian sources that the planes are compassion flights, but we have not been able to get confirmation of that from U.S. officials. We should have it soon. The feeling is that these planes are probably no threat to anyone, but that has not been finally nailed down yet, Darren. What is happening in the U.S. intelligence community and over in law enforcement is, of course, a tremendous amount of work. They are being flooded with all sorts of data, intelligence gathered, but also received and unsolicited. Countless emails and faxes are being sent to agencies from the White House to the CIA, claiming credit for the attacks, if credit is the right word, threatening future attacks. Much of this information, officials I've spoken to say, looks pretty wacky, but they are not able to eliminate any of it. Every lead is going to be checked, so there's a great deal of work to do. Now, the information that they have so far still leads U.S. officials to believe that those involved in these attacks will likely be proven eventually to have links to the group led by Osama bin Laden, the fugitive Saudi terrorist who is apparently living in Afghanistan. However, the net has been spread wide. They are not ruling out other possibilities. There are some experts who say that the sophistication and highly coordinated nature of this attack suggests strongly that some kind of state sponsorship might have been involved. Officials, U.S. officials, saying there's no evidence of that so far. However, they're not ruling it out. Some of these outside experts saying that, pointing out that Iraq appears to have had some sort of a role in the Ramzi Youssef matter some years back, and that some involvement by Iraq cannot be ruled out. U.S. officials saying they have no evidence of that, but they are spreading a very wide net indeed. Now, officials are confirming that there were a couple of intercepts, presumably of voices, spoken voices, connected with the bin Laden group after the attacks that occurred yesterday, talking about how successful they were. They're not happy that that information got out, And you can expect at the briefings that the closed-door briefings of the House and Senate that will occur, or that are scheduled to occur later today with the FBI, CIA, and other leaders, briefing members of Congress, that there will be a strong appeal to them to avoid leaks of any kind of information about the investigations. A great deal of concern about that. That is a major concern as they go forward from here. Darren?
David, I imagine that's going to be a tough balancing act. On one hand, to keep up the integrity of the investigation, as you mentioned, you don't want leaks to go out, and yet this country is going to be so hungry for information and will only feel comforted if it knows that an investigation is moving forward.
Well, that's right. The law enforcement and intelligence authorities of the country want it clear they're doing their jobs, that they are making progress, that they are gaining intelligence. At the same time, they don't want to compromise their investigation, which is in early stages when it could easily be compromised. So it's going to be a difficult balancing act, as you say, and I nonetheless expect that we will be learning more as the day progresses as to what they've got so far. Darren?
Very good reason to check back with you at a later date, later hour. Thank you very much. David Ensor in our D.C. Bureau. Leon.
All right, we've got a lot on deck for you this morning. We're continuing to cover every aspect of this story this morning. We have a number of live press conferences that are going to be getting underway any minute now. We're keeping our eye right now on one in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, which is just south of Pittsburgh, which is the site of one of those plane crashes. The FBI is going to be having a briefing there. We're also expecting the FBI to have a briefing at Boston's Logan Airport, so we'll keep an eye on those as well. And we have also learned that Morgan Stanley Dean Witter, the company that occupied some 50 floors of one of those towers at the World Trade Center and have lost so many employees there, they are going to be having a press conference this hour as well. So we're going to have coverage of all three of those conferences for you. And we understand that President Bush is going to be meeting with congressional leaders, and we will have live coverage for you of that as well. So much more is coming up in just a couple of minutes. We'll take a break right now. We'll be back with more in just a bit. But in the meantime, we want to give you a look at this in the aftermath of this attack. We've heard so many stories from those who witnessed the devastation in New York and in Washington, and here now is a look at how one man experienced it.
They told me just to wait here at this semi-staging area, see if I can help, and that's what I'm doing. My name's Mark Heath. I'm a cardiac anesthesiologist at Columbia Presbyterian on 168th Street. We saw that 2 planes had flown into the World Trade Center, thought that they would need all hands on deck. So I hopped into some scrubs and grabbed some medical stuff and just grabbed an ambulance stopped. I hopped in. Maybe leave the keys in the car so they can move it if they have to. Is there a staging area?
They're evacuating this whole area.
Yeah, but they had people who are hurt, right? They got to pull them out.
Estimate is we probably lost 200 firefighters.
Oh my God.
And God knows how many thousands of people.
Okay. So you want me to wait right here? Okay.
And stay away from any other high-rise building.
Okay. Let's just station up right here, okay? All right. Why don't we set up? We were instructed by a fire chief to start setting up a staging area right there. Then the second building came down. I videoed what I could, got behind a car. I hope I live. I hope I live. It's coming down on me. Here it comes. I'm getting behind a car. Everything went black. My eyes are open, and unless I've been blinded, it is black as night. Just tried to breathe. I was behind a car. I tried to smash one of the car windows so that I could climb into the car and get some fresh air, but I couldn't break the window, so just sort of went down into the gutter under the car. I'm sorry I came down. I just had to help people. I think I actually said into the microphone, I sort of apologized to my family for going down and trying to help, because I really didn't think I was going to make it out. Okay, I'm going to have to go find people who need help, because I don't think I'm one of them. You okay, sir? Okay. Can I just get a toot off your respirator? Yeah. Can I get a toot? I'm seeing a couple of clean breaths. It was hard to see. Everybody's eyes were full of dust and stinging, so it's actually quite hard to see anything.
Yeah. Okay.
Back to you. It's 10:41.
We're going to interrupt this piece right now. We want to take you live to the State Department. This is Richard Boucher taking questions and giving answers from reporters. Let's listen in.
Still apply, but it's as each mission looks at its security situation. Where does it feel safest? Where does it feel its vulnerabilities are? Are there vulnerabilities that we can correct by local action and things like that? And I would say the other thing is that around the world, our missions have been asking host governments for support and assistance in all kinds of things, closing down streets, adding more guards, adding more patrols, having visible police presence, things like that. And in every single case, we've gotten the support that we've asked for. Betsy?
Some countries have offered assistance to this country and, teams of people to help in the rubble at the World Trade Center and things like that. Has the U.S. responded to this? Have we accepted or rejected any offers of help?
We've been passing on all that information to the Federal Emergency Management Agency to make sure they know what's available from overseas sources. There's indeed been an outpouring of offers, specialized teams, bloods, just a whole lot of different things, equipment that people around the world have. I think we leave it to the federal authorities to sort of sort it out, figure out if there is stuff that we would find useful. There's also, as you know, been an outpouring of support and assistance in the United States among our own people in terms of giving blood, or teams from the country coming up to help with the search. So I'm not sure that'll be necessary, but let the appropriate federal authorities sort it out. I'm not aware that we've asked for anything at this point. Terry?
This morning the Secretary said that there's an accumulating mound of evidence, and that very soon the government will make a decision on what they should do. Are you steering us away from the general assumption that this is bin Laden related? Is when he talks about the evidence, is that pointing any other direction that you can share with us?
I'm not steering you in any direction whatsoever. I'm not steering you in circles either. I'm just not into this. We're not pointing fingers. We're not saying who done it. We're going to do this carefully. We're going to maintain the ability to collect information and not reveal the sources of it. And we're going to, I'm sure, make the decisions in a careful manner at the right time. And I'm not intending to steer you towards, away, or in any direction whatsoever. I'm not driving that car.
Return to Washington, did the Secretary have telephone contact with the President?
No, they didn't actually talk until he got back to Washington. Rich Armitage, of course, the Deputy Secretary, was here, was working with the entire National Security team. And Secretary talked to Mr. Armitage numerous times throughout the day. They can talk when they need to, and it works out for both of them. It just didn't happen to be the case yesterday.
You said there were no warnings that led to the closing of the 50 embassies and missions, but have there
No
been...
particular warnings. There's obviously worldwide threats.
Well, that's what I want to
Yeah.
know. Have there been any new warnings that lead to new concern about subsequent actions?
I think the warnings that we've issued before in terms of the June 22nd warning, the update that we did last week, those all still apply. I don't have any new information on that, though.
Richard, the King of Morocco canceled the trip to Mauritania and returned home, and the King of Jordan was also on his way here and also returned home. Is there any possible relationship between that and this event, in the sense that there's a dichotomy between these governments have all condemned the attacks and the people in the streets are all supporting it?
Once again, I'm really down here to tell you that Secretary can't brief right now. I wasn't coming to deal with all the dichotomies in the world, so I really don't feel I can do that right now. The two windows look like early afternoon or later in the afternoon, so between now and the end of the day. I'm sorry. I don't want to get us all out.
Some of us have to go back to offices.
I know. I don't want to get us all, back here at some time because I speculate at this point. I got to talk.
Like not before 1, not before 2.
Can you give us a half-hour warning?
Yeah, we'll give you as much warning as possible, and half hour seems more than reasonable.
Okay. Thank you.
We were listening to Richard Boucher, State Department spokesman. We'll wrap up what he had to say in just a moment, but while he was speaking, we got some very important information to us here at CNN. Word from the FAA. Of course, you were aware that flights were apparently or possibly supposed to resume across the U.S. at noon Eastern, 40 minutes from now. The FAA saying now that is not going to happen. They are not going to clear the hold on flights across the U.S. We don't have word yet on what the next deadline might be as to when flights might resume. But very importantly, FAA saying those flights will not resume across the U.S. 40 minutes from now, as was originally scheduled. Leon.
Yeah, that's going to complicate matters for quite a few people, because I heard reports this morning of people who have been driving from city to city to try to catch ahead, to get ahead of their travel plans for the day to perhaps get to the city they were going to leave on their connecting flight out of. And now it's going to complicate matters even further for them. So we'll keep our eyes on that and report you the latest details as we get them here. In the meantime, though, let's check in now with our Kate Snow, who's on Capitol Hill. Kate?
Leon, Congress has been in session now for just over an hour, both the Senate and the House taking a little break right now. But on both sides, in both chambers, what we're hearing and what we're seeing is raw emotion from members of Congress, people talking about the horrific events of yesterday. There are themes emerging. One theme that the Congress is unified, that there are no party lines here anymore. These attacks were attacks on the U.S.'s freedom. They were acts of cowardice, and Congress is prepared to fight whoever is responsible.
Make no mistake, this was an act of war against the United States and all of our people. And we will not be divided. All of us, the President, the Congress, and the American people, are today and will be tomorrow, and in all the tomorrows, totally and completely united in our determination to begin the process of healing and to take swift action to see that the people who committed this horrible crime are properly punished. May God shed His grace on this great and wonderful country and all of our people.
Dick Gephardt getting a standing ovation for his comments, echoed in the Senate chamber by Senator Daschle and Senator Lott. Senator Charles Schumer, the senior senator from New York, also spoke a short time ago. He talked very emotionally. He talked about his daughter, who goes to school at a building right next door to the Twin Towers, and how for 2 hours he and his wife struggled to find her. They weren't sure of her whereabouts. They did find her. Then he talked about the others who are missing in New York City.
I can see that as indicated it is looking to fly again later today. Again, United Airlines not indicating from what airports those flights will resume or when they will resume, but we'll be keeping you posted. Separately, we are expecting word from one or several of the major exchanges as to when they will reopen. The chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission has indicated it could come as early as tomorrow, whether that would be the traditional 9:30 open. Anyone's guess. This, of course, a symbolic move to say that the capitalist community is back in business, and the terrorists hoping to shut it down will be disappointed. So it's as much for symbolism, even though trading would likely be very, very light. On to some other issues now. For some insight into the Islamic terrorists, we're joined by Mark Juergensmeyer. He's the author of a book looking at the terrorists behind the last World Trade Center bombing. He's done extensive research on the terror mastermind, Osama bin Laden. And we've also got with us a fellow who knows a thing or two about terrorism, General George Jolan, the former NATO Supreme Commander. Mark, if I can begin with you. How do you catch a guy who's had a good deal of time now to run and to hide?
You don't catch it very easily. And you have to remember that if this is a war, first of all, it's a war that's proclaimed by Osama bin Laden and by the Islamic activists, a small crew of transnational activists. That's their war, the one that they proclaimed, and they would love for us to be sucked into their image of a global cosmic war. It's not. It's a very specific war with a very specific group. And we should beware of getting involved with a war with all Arab states, for example, and certainly not all Muslims. We should target our attacks very specifically against this one network and this one group of people.
But haven't we tried that already, and to little avail?
And that's the problem, because they are a very small network, but it's not going to help to widen this war to a broader group of Arab states. I think if we do that, then we're sucked into their image of a global war. I've talked with many people associated with the Osama bin Laden's movement. I've talked with people who tried to bomb the World Trade Center in 1993, who did bomb it, of course. And the only difference from their point of view of what happened in 1993 and what happened yesterday is that yesterday they were successful. In 1993, they were trying to bring down the whole of the World Trade Center. And when I talked with Mahmoud Abu Lima in prison, one of the people who was involved in the conspiracy to bomb the World Trade Center in '93, and I said, look, if you had been successful and you had brought down the whole of the World Trade Center, you might have killed as many as 200,000 people. And he said that's exactly the number of people that the United States killed in their act of terrorism in Hiroshima. So from his point of view, there was a moral equation between what he regarded as America's terrorism in the world and what they were trying to do.
I guess it's just hard to relate to this kind of nuttiness. But General, Julwan, maybe you can help me. There are reports, of course, that the Afghan government has or can get a hold of Osama bin Laden. But then you wonder whether it goes back to what President Bush said in his remarks to the nation last night, that we will hold not only the terrorists themselves responsible, but I'm paraphrasing here, those who house them. So would that essentially be the green light, and should it be the green light, to go after nations that just might let them reside within their borders?
But first of all, you have to get the facts. And I think the previous speaker was talking about getting the facts right here. And there's an enormous effort going on now, going through all kinds of intelligence reports to try to get the sort of information we need. We think we know where the finger is pointing. We have to be sure that it must be a focused effort in order to make sure that what we do is targeted at the right individual and right state if we determine that it is state-sponsored.
But see, and Mark, maybe you can always this, we never do. We never do know unequivocally that by going after, let's say, in Afghanistan, or if you wanted to expand it to Sudan, or any one of a host of enemy countries, whether you're doing more harm than good, that the knee-jerk response, and quite justifiably so, is to go after all of the SOBs. But in so doing, do you not deepen the crisis, or maybe is that what we're looking at?
Well, that's exactly the problem. The problem is to go in like gangbusters and overreact might, in fact, provoke more violence from Osama bin Laden's cadres, but also suck in state activists, to suck in Arab states into being involved in a war with us that they're not involved in right now.
So you fear, in other words, a constant tit for tat, like Ronald Reagan attacks Libya, you know, after the Beirut bombings, they go after one of our planes and shoot them down, and on and on and on it goes, right?
But this is not a state. Remember, this is the difference between this and Pearl Harbor. This is not Pearl Harbor. We're not attacked by a country.
General, what do you think of that?
Attacked by one guy in Afghanistan.
We have got to change the way we're doing business here, and that is we've got to institutionalize, not just have an attack against for one day or 1 week. We've got to change the way that we're looking at this. This is a long-term operation. You're dealing with a very small cell. They've probably gone to ground. We've got to change the way we look at things. It isn't just fighting two major theater wars somewhere. We have got to organize ourselves. That's military, police, ambassadors, political, all to understand that this has to be an interagency with our allies response to try to understand how do we prevent one of these from occurring.
Yeah, but I got to tell you, General, I got to tell you, from some of those allies, even in their editorials today, they're saying we can understand and sympathize with you, USA, but you got to check with us before you go after anyone.
Well, I don't think that's. We have the right to respond to this horrific attack against our people. But let us not, we need to try to work with our allies, but we do have the right to respond. But let us get institutionally correct here. We're not there yet.
And the General is right. We're in a new era, the transnational actors and a new kind of war.
All right, guys, thank you both very much, General.
Thank you.
And Mark. Welcome back, everybody, to Fox News continuing coverage of the terrorism that hit America yesterday and is changing everyone's lives ever since. Some of the updated figures we have for you, you've probably heard maybe up to 800 casualties at the Pentagon, about 266 on those 4 planes that were hijacked, 3 of which were used in essentially kamikaze air raids on some of the most well-known structures in the United States, the World Trade Center, of course, the Pentagon. 300 firemen are missing, presumed dead. 78 policemen missing, presumed dead. The count could go up by a staggering sum. We now join Tony Snow in Washington with the latest from the nation's capital. Hey, Tony.
Hey, Neil. A couple of things. Even though the President of the United States and key members of both the House and Senate have used the term war today to describe the attacks yesterday on American targets in New York and in Washington, D.C., I've been assured by a senior leadership official in the House of Representatives that there is no contemplation, at least today, of considering a declaration of war. Instead, what the House is probably going to do is offer tomorrow what they call a permanent supplemental. It basically means a blank check to the President of the United States to use however he wishes in trying to wage, you call it war, call it a response to yesterday's attacks. That means in terms of intelligence expenditures, military expenditures, you name it. And it sounds as if members of both parties are on board with that. In addition, NATO, evidently, Rick Boucher in a briefing just a few minutes ago with reporters hinted that NATO is likely to pass a resolution, a so-called Article 5 resolution, that not only would express solidarity with the United States, but also pave the way for some form of military cooperation should we figure out exactly what it is we want to do. You just alluded to the fact that some foreign newspapers are saying, okay, you need to deal with us and foreign ministers. It looks as if NATO ministers are at this point willing to start working on military cooperation. I spoke earlier today with Secretary of State Colin Powell. He said something very much like that is underway. Rick Boucher also noted that 25% of our embassies and missions overseas, that is, our embassies and consulates overseas, that's 50 to 60 of them, have closed, at least for now. That's subject to the call of the counselor or the consular general or the ambassador at the site. They can determine whether they've got security needs that require closing the facility. That has happened. We're expecting the Department of Transportation to issue at noon today, in less than half an hour, on the internet a statement presumably regarding the nation's airports, which will let us know what's going to be open today, what's not going to be open. And finally, members of Congress are agreeing on a great deal today. Also in the House of Representatives, evidently they're going to hold a prayer vigil at about 8 o'clock tonight. The time isn't firm yet. A prayer vigil in the rotunda of the United States Capitol. That will be open to the press and obviously produce a lot of pictures. So there's a great deal of activity. Also, Colin Powell, the Secretary of State, is expected to brief the press 2:30. They're trying to figure out the exact time today. And the president and his advisors are playing phone tag, or at least they're getting in touch by phone with leaders all over the country. It is pretty obvious that the United States is preparing some sort of military option. The timeline unknown. When Secretary of State Colin Powell was on TV today earlier, he made it pretty clear that they think that they're narrowing in very rapidly on the people responsible, and they think they're going to be ready to move. Neil?
All right, Tony, thank you very, very much. Tony Snow in Washington. Of course, we will be going to Tony throughout the day to get the latest developments in Washington. Of course, the Pentagon bombing, as we told you about, we have close to 100 known casualties right now, but it could rapidly exceed that, maybe as many as 800. We do want to hear from you about these events over the last 24 hours, and I want to bring my buddy David Asman in here to sort of pick apart developments as well. David, some fast and furious movements today.
Indeed there are. Great to be with you here, though, Neil. What are your thoughts? We want to know what you think about all this. How are you feeling about this? Does it give you pause? Does it make you afraid of America, or does it give you the resolve to fight back? Give us a call, 1-888-TEL-FOX. We're going to be taking those calls very soon.
All right. In the meantime, Dave, we're going to go to Jeff Goldblatt, who's live in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, where one of those 4 planes went down, and there might have been a little heroism involved there, Jeff, huh?
Yes, indeed, there may have, Neil. Unlike the terrorism targets at the Pentagon and in New York, where there is still hope today of finding survivors, here in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, where United Flight 93 went down, that hope, it is long gone. The flight en route from Newark to San Francisco, and the focus today is on recovery of debris and also what happened. The flight left Newark yesterday shortly after 8 o'clock and made it as far west as the Cleveland area before taking a turn to the south and then the southeast in the direction of the nation's capital before going down here in Shanksville, which is about 80 miles to the southeast of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Why this plane went down here and not perhaps a more high-profile target, as some are now speculating, could be the result of heroics from either the crew or some passenger who made it into the cockpit and decided that if I'm going to die, I'm going to take this plane down here in a rural area and not in some high-profile target area. This morning, investigators from the NTSB, the FBI, and also the ATF are on site treating this as a crime scene. They've set up 2 perimeters, one an inner perimeter and also an outer perimeter, about 4 miles in radius, and they're scouring the site. But they say it's going to be a long investigation, Neil, because there's very little there that's any bigger than a telephone book. What they're going to go after immediately, though, the in-flight voice recorder and also the data recorder, which are of vital importance.
All right, Jeff, thank you very, very much. That's an amazing story, Jeff. If you could still hear me, that some of those guys on the plane had the wherewithal to know they were going to die, but to avoid an even bigger catastrophe, they forced these hijackers down.
Yeah, Neil, I can still hear you. We heard from Congressman Murtha, Democrat in the 12th District this morning here in Pennsylvania, and that was his speculation as to why the plane went down here. He also talked about why this scene is critical to this investigation as to all the terrorism targets that were hit yesterday, and the reason being the likelihood that these black boxes might be found. Unlike in New York and also at the Pentagon, where it could be a long time before the black boxes are found, if they are ever found. Here the crater is about 35 feet deep. And it doesn't, investigators do not believe, at least preliminarily, that the black boxes would have been compromised, even though this was a violent crash, and so that some data might be retrievable, perhaps later this week, and perhaps getting some preliminary information as early as early next week, Neil.
All right, Jeff Goldblatt, thank you very, very much. Jeff Goldblatt at the scene of what might have been a heroic effort outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, on the part of the people doomed on that flight to make sure the damage wasn't even more severe. Dave?
And joining us now, former NTSB board member and Fox News contributor Dr. Vernon Gross. Dr. Gross, if it is conceivable that they find that black box somewhere in that deep pit, that crater that was created by that plane crash out in rural Pennsylvania, are they going to be able to retrieve any data from it?
I think it depends on 2 things, Neil. First of all, they have to make sure that the terrorists themselves did not disable the recorders. They already disabled the transponder. The transponder allowed air traffic control on the ground to track the aircraft. And in the case of the other 3 aircraft, the terrorists disabled the transponder. If they also did that to the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder, then there would be nothing on them, even if you found them.
Dr. Gross, could you just hold your thoughts for a moment, please? We've got a breaking development.
Indeed, we do, Dave. At Logan International Airport outside of Boston, where 2, of course, of the doomed hijack flights took off. They're having a presser right now. Let's listen in.
We ready, everyone? Is the microphone on? Yep. Good morning. My name, again, is Virginia Buckingham, Executive Director and CEO of the Massachusetts Port Authority. I'm joined here this morning by Massachusetts U.S. Attorney Jim Farmer, by FBI Special Agent in Charge Charlie Prouty, by State Police Colonel John DeFava, Massport Director of Aviation Tom Kitten, and Massport Director of Public Safety Joe Lawless. This morning, I instructed Massport staff to focus on 3 priorities. Number 1 is to continue to assist law enforcement with the ongoing investigation. Number 2 is to work with the airline's family assistance teams to transition the Family Assistance Center at the Hilton to them and to continue to aid the numerous family members who are currently at the airport. Number 3 is to begin to focus on reopening the airport, including full compliance with the new security requirements being imposed on all U.S. airports. We received specific guidance on these measures from the FAA a short time ago, and I'm proud to say that many of these measures have been in place at Logan for many years. In addition, I spoke with Governor Swift this morning, and she has instructed us to go beyond these FAA requirements by placing state police at all security checkpoints at Logan Airport. With the new FAA requirements and the additional security at Logan, we are confident that when the airport is reopened, the safety of the traveling public will be ensured. I'm going to turn this over to our other speakers. Let me just say that due to the ongoing investigation and for the sake of public safety, the law enforcement officials who are here with us today are limited in the questions that they can answer and the facts that they can confirm. Let me first ask Tom Kinton, the Director of Aviation for Logan Airport, to speak.
Good morning. As Ginny mentioned, we are focused on a reopening of this airport, and I cannot tell you what time that will occur. I'm going to go through a number of issues, summarizing the guidance that we have been given by FAA, both the airlines and the airport operator, that has to be done and has to be in place before this airport can open. A lot of it, as you will see, will take a lot of time, and we are going to take our time. And if we have to delay the reopening of this airport, as others open around the country, we will delay the reopening to get it done and get it right. First of all, let me reemphasize that the guidance is for all U.S. airports. It will begin with immediately evacuation of all terminals and sweeping of canine teams, explosive canine teams. Increased presence of uniformed personnel, plainclothes security personnel, and others in all areas of the airport. And as you heard mentioned, we will be staffing the security checkpoints with uniformed state police, which goes beyond the guidance given to us by FAA. Be increasing the frequency of random ID checks in the secured areas of Logan Airport. We will secure, we already have them in place, bomb detection teams for quick response here at Logan Airport. We will be reducing the number of operational access points into the airport. We will also discontinue curbside check-in and remove unauthorized vehicles that are within 300 feet of any terminal building. And that point there is probably one of the most time-consuming things we have to accomplish, because presently there are over 9,000 vehicles parked at Logan Airport. One of the garages, Terminal B, has almost 2,500 vehicles, and it needs to be emptied. We're in the process of doing that and relocating those cars to Suffolk Downs. And we will not reopen that terminal, certainly, and perhaps not the airport, until that task is completed. There is FAA is prohibiting the sale or use of knives, regardless of any size, in any sterile areas of the airport. That includes concession operators, food, beverage, as well as any retail operators that may sell such items. That means anything metal or plastic. Airport operators will develop an awareness plan to keep all airport employees informed about security. And the airport operators and the FAA shall review and reevaluate these contingency plans for ongoing airport security threats that may develop. Airlines will not be accepting cargo or mail. And prior to passenger boarding of any airplanes, those aircraft must undergo a comprehensive search. That's each and every flight before they are boarded by passengers. And as I said at the beginning, we do not have an estimate on when this airport will reopen. Possibly it could be for some relocation of flights that are on the ground, ferrying empty airplanes back into position later today. And again, no estimate on reopening the airport for commercial flights until we have a better handle on both the airline responsibility here and the airport operator responsibilities being fulfilled. We've already had an air carrier meeting. We held it this morning. This work is underway, and we'll be meeting with the air carriers later this afternoon to update and keep the traveling public updated relative to the reopening of Logan Airport. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. The next speaker is Colonel John DeFava, Massachusetts State Police.
Thank you, Director. Good morning. The Massachusetts State Police is prepared to provide all necessary resources to assist the Massport Authority in reaching and surpassing those new security measures as mandated by the FAA. These resources will include additional personnel, special and tactical units such as explosive ordnance disposal personnel, and canines that are capable of sniffing out explosives. These measures will stay in place indefinitely to ensure the safety of the public at the airport. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Charlie Prouty, FBI Special Agent in Charge, Boston.
Thank you, Director. I want to reassure all New England citizens that your law enforcement is aggressively investigating this horrific event. First of all, my heart goes out to the victims and the families in this tragedy. Because this appears to be a terrorist attack, the FBI will be taking lead investigative status in this. We set up a command post in the FBI office in Boston yesterday as soon as we received notice of the hijacking. This is a joint command post with State Department, ATF, Customs, the Massachusetts State Police, OSI, Boston Police Department, Department of Transportation, U.S. Secret Service, and the U.S. Marshals represented. We're also involved in Massport's command post at Logan Airport. We'll continue to man these command posts and continue our joint investigations around the clock until all investigations have been completed. We are coordinating our investigation with FBI headquarters and with other federal agencies. A website and a toll-free tip line has been established. For this case, we're using the Internet Fraud Complaint Center website, which is www.ifccfbi.gov, because it's an existing site designed to receive information from the public. The toll-free number is 1-866-483-5137, and we've had these two lines up for the last day, and we have been getting some good information and some good tips. At this time, the White House is coordinating all public information at the national level. As this is an ongoing case, I'll not be discussing the case or taking any questions, but I can assure you that absolutely everything will be done to identify and bring the perpetrators to justice. Thank you.
Sorry. We have one more speaker, Massachusetts U.S. Attorney Jim Farmer.
Thank you, Director Buckingham. I'm really here to second the comments of Mr. Prouty. I'm here first to doubly ensure the public that the prosecutive resources of the Department of Justice, and specifically the United States Attorney Office in Massachusetts, are working round the clock in the closest possible coordination with all federal, state, and local law enforcement.
Razor blades. Now, these are sources familiar with the investigation talking to the Boston Herald, and that is consistent with apparently a flight attendant. Cell phone calls indicated as well. Now, I want to show you one of the latest pictures of what is going on here in New York City. You have the USS George Washington now moving into New York Harbor. It will patrol the waters off of New York City. In addition to that, a number of other naval vessels are on the move right now. Some headed towards New York City, some coming to the Washington, D.C. area to even help with some of the medical challenges that both cities are confronting at the moment. It is interesting to note that President Bush announced earlier today that he had asked for a spending resolution that would enable the United States to spend, quote, whatever it takes to deal with the magnitude of this horrendous tragedy that is confronting our nation. And I will have some more details for you in a moment or two. Back to Darren, who joins us from Atlanta.
Paula, thank you very much. Of course, people across the country are looking toward the rescue efforts that are taking place. We're showing a live picture now from New York City. As we mentioned, and Paula has told us earlier, about 11 people have been rescued so far. As time goes on, fire officials have explained to us it becomes more difficult to do their job of rescuing. However, hope and prayers from across the country going towards that rescue site, both in New York City and also a hope toward the Pentagon. Leon.
Well, Darren, you know, the only site that New York is not the only site that we have been keeping our eyes on. Washington as well. Let's go there now. Bob Franken checking in from the Pentagon. Bob?
Oh, Leon, we're about to show you something quite remarkable. You, of course, have heard that every effort will be made to investigate this case. There will be an exhaustive search for evidence. Well, we just had a demonstration of that right in front of our cameras. The FBI obviously trying to make the point for the world to see. FBI agents fanned out just about 20 feet from where we are right now, fanned out in a grassy area that was close to the path of the airplane that crashed into the Pentagon, looking very closely at the ground, sweeping the ground, so to speak, looking for anything that might be relevant, looking for even the smallest little piece of information that might provide some evidence that would be useful in the investigation of this particular part of this, the three planes that crashed into various buildings. This one was an American Airlines 757. It crashed into the Pentagon about 26 hours ago, 26 hours ago. The investigation is going full tilt, as is the effort to try and see just how bad the damage is inside and just how many casualties there are. We're hearing now that they've located maybe scores of bodies. By scores, I mean under 100 located, but perhaps not removed from the building. The Pentagon is not giving out actual figures. Of course, there have been estimates that there could be several hundred people whose lives were lost here, although various Pentagon officials do not in fact agree that it's going to be that high. But while that search is going on, and it's very fitful because of the precarious nature of the building, many of the families and loved ones of some of the friends and loved ones of the people who are missing inside can only stand here and watch.
I told her that her father was missing and that when I knew, I would tell her. If he does come out in any type of capacity, that I will be one of the first ones there.
They sent in some dogs, but that there was no sign of life. But that, what else? It might be several days before they can even start pulling out bodies.
And Leon, while the search is being conducted in a very painstaking way, firemen are still trying to put out the blaze, which on a spot basis has spread throughout much of the building. Leon?
All right, thanks to Bob Franken, standing by there at that focal point for us there in Washington, the Pentagon. Now, up to New York and Paula.
All right, we're going to head back to what is the second news conference of the day, held by New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani. Let's listen in. Unfortunately,
nevertheless, I hate to say this, but I'm sure those terrorists who hijacked the planes were praying to their own God. And the question is, how do we distinguish between the peaceful followers of Islam and the supporters of terrorists?
Well, all Muslims, of course, are not murderers and barbarians.
Okay, Reverend, I'm sorry to interrupt you here. New York Mayor Giuliani is speaking in New York. Let's listen.
We have more volunteers than we know what to do with right now. But please continue to volunteer, because we're going to need you tomorrow and the next day and the day after. And, you know, our firefighters and police officers are going to get pretty exhausted after a period of time. So the outpouring of volunteers has been tremendous, and we're very, very thankful for that. And the city, the people of the city, their spirit is tremendous. And I said that yesterday, and I'll say it again. This city is the greatest city in the world. It has the greatest people, and a bunch of cowardly terrorists can't make us fearful. We're stronger than they are. We're better than they are. And people of the city proved it yesterday. They're going to prove it today. And they're going to be a great example of what Americans are like. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, in New York, Mayor Giuliani, he's been the #1 cheerleader for the city of New York right now, indicating, well, there is, at least at this point, no way to determine how many died in this disaster. New York's finest are doing their best, including just the general residents of New York. Dave Asman's certainly one of those. And it has been unusual, just the camaraderie and the sense of togetherness out of this city that gets a bad rap.
The one thing that everybody appears to agree on at this point is that Mayor Giuliani has done a fabulous job taking all kinds of questions, all times of night, following his people wherever they go.
And he doesn't sleep. This guy has not
sleep,
slept.
and yet he still maintains his calm, maintains his determination. He's not weak-kneed one bit. He stands firm and strong and committed.
And I think he goes back to his DA days, district attorney days.
Yeah.
I mean, he has a fine legal mind, and he just has that deliberate style that is just tailor-made for a disaster.
We're glad we have him for the moment. We want to go back to Reverend Jerry Falwell. Reverend, I cut you off in mid-sentence. The question distinguishing between the terroristic followers of Islam and the peaceful followers of Islam. It's going to be hard to do in the coming weeks and months.
It is, and we must be careful not to generalize. Most Muslims are peace-loving people who are just trying to live and let live. But the fundamentalist Muslims, I'm talking about the bin Ladens, I'm talking about also the crazed extremists like Yasser Arafat and Saddam Hussein. The only cure for these people is the one that Ronald Reagan imposed upon Muammar Gaddafi 20 years ago. He put a missile down his chimney, killed some of his family, unfortunately. But Mr. Gaddafi decided to get out of the terrorism business, and in 20 years, we've hardly heard of him.
Understood. Reverend Falwell, again, we have breaking news all over the place. I hope you understand we have to break in once again.
All right, Tony Snow in Washington. What have you got, Tony?
Neil, very quickly, one of our producers out at the Pentagon is reporting that the Pentagon is being evacuated. The people are running out of the building as you no doubt know that the fire was never completely stopped, and the way fires work is that they tend to work quite often within the framework of building, dancing through air ducts and so on. Evidently, the fire has gotten worse. We do not have any video. We don't have any correspondence at the site at the moment, but as soon as we do, obviously we'll be bringing that news to you. But again, to repeat, one of our producers has informed us that people are evacuating the Pentagon. There's a shot of the Pentagon. You don't see much that would indicate that sense of urgency, but that's the report we have, and obviously we'll get back to you with more as soon as we have confirmation.
And Tony, if I'm to understand it, this would have been even worse had this particular portion of the Pentagon not been recently reinforced. Hard to imagine how it could have been much worse, but that it actually could have been.
Not only was it being reinforced, but also it was being renovated. So a lot of the offices in that particular portion of the Pentagon were vacant. Nevertheless, yesterday we had Cherry reports that they thought that there might be a fairly low casualty estimate. And indeed, if you take that particular slice of the Pentagon, certainly a couple of thousand people should have been there. We've heard estimates today ranging from 100 to 800 may have died in yesterday's attack. And furthermore, that they don't expect any more survivors. I have a feeling that the structural and interior damage is far worse than we originally were led to believe. But on the other hand, when you have fires with that kind of intensity and that kind of heat, it takes a very long time for people to put it out sufficiently even to be able to examine it. Firefighters were all over the roof of the Pentagon last night punching holes in it, trying to provide air for the flames to come through so they could simply figure out where the flames were and where the fire had traveled. And that's the kind of challenge that they're going to be facing until they get this thing taken care of.
All right, Tony, thank you very, very much. Before I turn over to Dave here, I just want to update you on Keith Brett Woods. You're going to start hearing more talk of this. Those who had offices in one of the two World Trade Centers yesterday confirming that they cannot account for 172 of their workers. Neither can Morgan Stanley Dean Witter, that it has limited information on the safety of its workers. Separately, Senator Chuck Schumer says, regardless, it's a good time that the market should open as soon as possible. Dave?
And we want to go back down to Washington, where our David Schuster, who has been following events very carefully in the Pentagon, has more information. Once again, we want to say, while it's being evacuated, this is not another terrorist attack of any kind. We're just talking about a fire that is very difficult to put out, very difficult to control, sprouting out in places where they are unprepared to deal with it. That appears to be the reason why the Pentagon is now being evacuated. But David Schuster, back to you. David Schuster? David Schuster, can you hear us? All right, apparently our connection...
Are you able to hear me?
There we go. David Schuster, we can hear you now. Go ahead. David Schuster, you're on the air.
David,
Go ahead.
can you hear me? Well, David, if you can hear me, I'm going to just let you know that there have been 3 fires that apparently broke out this morning underneath the Pentagon roof that have spread significantly beyond the point of impact that we're all familiar with, that big gaping hole on the south side of the building. The smoke was apparently getting fairly thick towards the center, towards the A and the B rings that are closest to the center courtyard, and that is some of the areas where they had hoped that the fire would not spread. So that has caused certain sections of the Pentagon where they had hoped some employees would be able to go back in. That has caused them now to tell those people, no, you're going to have to go back out and leave. It's not the sort of mass chaotic confusion with the evacuation yesterday when the American Airlines jetliner smashed into the side, but nonetheless, this is sort of another sign of the frustration that the firefighters have had in battling the blaze at the Pentagon. It's a huge structure, 23,000 employees. It's some 500,000 square feet, and one of the problems that they have had is that the fire is spreading not just up through the roof, but is going through each of the different wedges within the Pentagon. Starting, of course, on the south side, it has apparently now turned the corner to some of the other concentric sides of the Pentagon. 5 sides of the Pentagon. You have the southwest side that you're looking at here. Apparently the fire in a couple spots has now turned the corners, making its way office by office down the hallway. For much of the night, for much of the morning, we've seen firefighters dumping hundreds of gallons of water a minute on the roof. The problem that they're having, though, is they're not always essentially getting on the flames. Some of the flames are sprouting up in places where the firefighters on top of the roof cannot see them. And again, this is causing a lot of confusion, a lot of angst within the Pentagon in a lot of the offices where they thought that some employees would be able to return today. This has been a very orderly process at the Pentagon. This has not been described as very chaotic or a lot of confusion. It's just frustration that the firefighters are not able to control the fire to the degree that they wish they would have been able to now, some 27 hours after the jetliner crashed in the south side of the Pentagon. Back to you.
David, what is the very latest on casualty
and
figures?
In case you're asking me any questions, I've lost IFB,
Right.
so I'm going to leave it at that.
All right. David Schuster is reporting from the Pentagon. Once again, the fire situation there continues to be hazardous. There are evacuations being made right now, not because of another terrorist attack. This is not because of another terrorist attack. This is related to yesterday's attack. The fires are extraordinarily difficult to put out, primarily because the casings of the Pentagon, as you would imagine, were so thick that it's difficult for the firefighters to get their rescue efforts, the water inside the Pentagon, and these fires keep spurting out in all kinds of different directions. So the evacuation is taking place. As you can see, it's very orderly. There does not appear to be any type of panic whatsoever. You're looking down at the bottom of your screen at recent estimates, the top of which have come in much higher than we originally believed they would. We had thought because this particular area of the Pentagon, which was hit hardest by the plane crash, by the terrorist act, was being renovated, that perhaps it would be devoid of a lot of the personnel that was normally there. That may have been true, but still, upward estimates are that perhaps as many as 800 people, in addition to those in the plane itself, died as a result of this terrorist act on our military headquarters of the United States. There is a news conference happening now in Pennsylvania about the crash of the airline there. Let's listen in.
FBI Pittsburgh office, 412-471-2000.
Stay with us, please. We're holding on. We may still have the audio portion of that press conference on the plane that went down in Pennsylvania. Let's see if we do. No, unfortunately, we lost both the video and the audio. But our Eric Shawn, I believe, is at Ground Zero, and there is a press conference happening there in New York. Let's see if we can get any audio from that one.
And many of you were here last night when Governor Ridge addressed the group. Obviously, we take our responsibility very seriously, and the prime responsibility of the Pennsylvania State Police is scene security and to assist the FBI in any way that we can with this investigation. To that end, we have approximately 130 troopers working a day shift and approximately 150 troopers working a night shift to ensure that only authorized personnel are allowed at the crime scene. In addition to that, we also have the mounted unit, our helicopter units, and other personnel from the Pennsylvania State Police to ensure security as well as to assist the FBI with their forensic search. As Agent Covington said, we expect to be here several weeks, and our commitment is to make sure that the sanctity of this place where 45 souls were lost, as well as the possibility of gaining critical evidence to solve crimes too heinous to even discuss or think about is accomplished. Agent.
Any questions?
Corbington, are people actually out there right now collecting evidence? Or are you still mapping?
Still mapping and gridding.
Any evidence, sir, of a bomb on board at this point?
We have nothing at this point with respect to that issue. Again, we are mapping and gridding. We haven't collected anything yet.
How about telephone calls made aboard that plane to family and 911 centers describing that there's 3 people aboard the plane, they had hijacked the plane, and they knew they were going down?
I would ask that you direct that question to Jeff Colleen, the Pittsburgh office, at 412-471-2000.
Sir, do you have any reason to think that those calls have been real? Would you be doubting those reports?
Quite frankly, our efforts have been focused, as you can imagine, here at this location. Again, I can only direct you to contact Jeff Colleen at our Pittsburgh office.
We heard that a